This is Atomic Shinobi, and today I'm going to narrate second part of What If Kid Naruto and Gaara were secretly trained by Kakashi. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
This was not possible under any circumstances. He was not witnessing a massive white cloud gradually dissipating to unveil an abomination of an estate. There was just no way. Release, not a genjutsu, please. Gosh, sensei, sometimes you're just too much, Kakashi sighed, resigned to acknowledge that the enigmatic estate had, in fact, been concealed in an ordinary foot-long scroll. How could that have happened? However, sensei was nothing more than a simple egotist. Readjusting his headband to its initial position, the youthful shinobi scrutinized the building that had suddenly appeared in front of him with great intensity. The principal building was proudly tucked away in the middle of the formerly deserted clearing. Conversely, there was a smaller but no less magnificent structure to its left, which he assumed to be the dojo. Returning his attention to the soaring residence, he saw that the exterior wall, which he had initially believed to be merely a gray stone exterior, was actually composed of multiple layers of bricks with shades of gray, white, and black. It had an even more regal air because the colors blended so well together. The main house is flawlessly decorated with numerous rows of symmetrically arranged windows, framed in white. He was reminded of a U by the main house's basic shape, or blueprint. The front door featured two doors and was exquisitely carved from solid mahogany wood with a dark mahogany finish that accentuated the home's wealth. The outside alone looks like it must have cost a fortune. The famous copyman became interested in one small detail as Kakashi was admiring the magnificent entryway. Nothing was present, not even a handle or doorknob. As he stepped up for a closer look, the silver-headed man remarked, "Well, this is peculiar." A flash of light appeared to the right of the entrance. His throat began to painfully tighten the moment he saw the immaculate platinum plaque shining in the early morning light. Etched elegantly on a shimmering silver plaque was the Namikaze name, proudly on show for all to see. It was breathtakingly lovely. This time, sensei had really outdone himself. Kakashi stepped forward and tentatively touched the family name that he wished had not almost completely disappeared from the face of the planet. Naruto at least remains. His fingers were just getting tan, but as soon as they touched the cool, smooth surface, a tendril of chakra shot through his body. Kakashi abruptly withdrew his limb and pressed it against his chest. The shock hadn't been unpleasant, but it was so sudden that the seasoned Jonin was taken aback. Years of experience as a shinobi going into overdrive, the retired Anbu started to analyze the situation right away. What was that? It made sense that, as a watchful and protective man, sensei would have installed something a little more sophisticated than a standard lock and key for his residence. The Sharingan showed him that a seal was concealed within the plaque when he lifted his headband once more to reveal his reddish iris. Kakashi suspected that the seal would react only to specific chakra signatures because he had recognized one of the symbols for a very long time. With his mind made up, the fearsome copyman raised his hand to the plaque once more and released a spark of his chakra. Well, hopefully sensei enabled me to be able to open it, or else I'm going to have to go and bring Naruto. His chakra should be similar enough to sensei's, so the seal should respond to him. Suddenly, the plaque glowed a vivid blue, making the seal visible and illuminated even to the unaided eye. "Sensei, I knew you were a show-off, but this is getting ridiculous." His focus was diverted from the glowing name to the entryway, where the imposing doors slowly opened inward, by a sharp creaking sound. At least his risk had been profitable. He was inside. Gaara was left on his own after the man who had saved him from the abyss of despair that had once been his village had firmly closed the door behind him. Like all young children, Gaara was naturally curious. Kakashi had given him a book the previous evening so he could pass the time. He was captivated by the intriguing book and ended up reading it late into the morning, right after the tall, silver-haired man departed. After finishing the book that had entertained him with tales of legendary Konoha figures like the Yondaime, Gaara found himself attempting to find a way to pass the time. Since Kakashi had already finished the book and his apartment was small to begin with, exploring was not an option. He discovered the customary ninja supply room, a compact kitchen, a spacious bathroom, and two bedrooms, the smaller of which contained a sleeping boy. What then does a 5-year-old do with themselves when they are idle and bored? The redhead was sitting serenely on the couch, taking in his circumstances, when there was an abrupt noise from one of the other rooms, grumbling. The young boy peered through the plain white door to see a taller, blond boy who was groggily rubbing his eyes. "Gaara, why are you up so early? Where's big brother?" the boy on the couch asked, staring with bewildered, owlish deep blue eyes. "I do not know," He left a short while ago. Naruto clutched his stomach in sudden alarm. Left? But I'm hungry. What are we gonna do about breakfast? Before he left, he said that we could help ourselves to anything in his fridge. Ew. All he has in there is vegetables and healthy crap like that. You know what? We're gonna go get some real food. Where are we going? As he put on his shoes, the boy with facial hair grinned mischievously and said, Ichiraku's of course. Hurry up, Gar, or I'm leaving ya behind. Without needing to be reminded twice, the redhead quickly put on the mask and hood he had worn the day before and was soon trotting alongside the animated blonde boy. He was determined to have ramen for breakfast. As they made their way to his own little paradise, Naruto asked, So how did ya sleep last night, Gar? They strolled down the street together, his hands clasped behind his head covered in spikes of blonde hair. With his teal eyes directed towards the now intriguing dirt road, Gaara replied quietly, Oh, well, I don't sleep. With a startled halt, Naruto lowered his arms to his sides and cast a suspicious glance at the smaller boy standing next to him, who had also stopped moving. Naruto scowled angrily, Don't sleep. If you were awake all last night, why didn't you wake me up? I would have kept you company. Why? Wouldn't you want to sleep? With a big, friendly smile, Naruto answered, Well, duh, but it's not fun being awake all by yourself. It can even be scary since it's all dark and stuff. Besides, it's always better to have someone with you when you can't sleep. Gaara was shocked by the response and stared incredulously at the blonde. Naruto, even if I wanted to sleep, I can't. Can't? How come? If I sleep then the voice will come back. Voice? The typically overly enthusiastic boy's expression was one of total bewilderment. The young red man sighed softly and started to reveal the darkest secret of his brief life. My father would do anything to keep me awake because ever since I can remember, every time I fell asleep, a voice would whisper horrible things to me all through the night. I haven't had any sleep in a really long time. Naruto listened with an almost unequaled level of concentration for a young Jinchuriki. The training future shinobi heard the facts, made a decision, and then proceeded to help his new little brother because that was the role of big brothers. Don't worry little bro, I'm going to help you get some sleep, Naruto said with total determination and confidence. Kakashi and the old man always told me that every growing boy needs their rest. So I'm going to tell them to help you. They probably know some super cool jutsu that can keep that voice away. He promised that he would solve Gaara's problem. Teal's eyes widened in shock upon hearing, Can you really do that? With a broad grin from ear to ear and a thumbs up, Naruto sealed the fate of 3 people in that instant. Of course I can. Believe it. Abruptly, a petite figure clung to the upper body of a blonde who was still grinning. Even though the little redhead's muffled cry was hardly audible, Naruto was still able to understand him. Thank you. Thank you so much. He had long since done Kakashi almost exactly the same thing. With his free hand, Naruto ruffled his short red hair and smiled, saying, You're my little brother now, Gaara. I'll always be here for ya. Believe it. As he moved farther inside, he became more aware of how much of himself his sensei had poured into making his future home appear eerily empty at first. The living room had been the first room he'd entered. It had been painted a maroon red color, and picture frames were arranged in perfect symmetry all the way along the wall. Examining some of them more closely, he saw himself in multiple of them. The framed picture of his old team was resting on top of the mantel of the fireplace that occupied the middle of the spacious room. Kakashi carefully picked it up in his tattered hands and traced the faces of the people he had become accustomed to taking for granted. Oh, how he wished he could go back in time and avoid all of his mistakes. Minato. Sensei. Rin. Obito. How fickle fate is, isn't it? There was a gorgeous red-haired woman's portrait next to the team photo. Kushina. You would have absolutely adored Naruto. He reminds me of you sometimes. So hard-headed. Upon advancing to view the subsequent frame, Kakashi experienced a sharp pain in his chest when breathing. It was there. It was the first photo he ever took with his sensei. He hadn't been his sensei at the time, though. Kakashi felt the intensely painful feelings he had attempted to suppress on the day his sensei was buried come back to him as he looked at the picture in a daze. Nearly 11 years prior, at the village's annual spring festival, a traveling photographer had captured the picture. The picture, innocent as it was, had no idea how much pain it brought him to look at the smiling face of the man who had become his teacher and then his surrogate father. Unwanted visions of his biological father appeared in his mind, pale white and fatally wounded from a steel blade through his chest. Kakashi shook his head, trying to get rid of the memory of the last time he had seen his father, and fought back tears at the memories that had followed him for so long. That's the reason he turned out the way he did in the past. At the age of 5, he had just become a genin and graduated first in his class. That day, his father had seemed so proud of him. However, a few months later, he had passed away. However, his past had not always been so depressing. Beneath his black mask, Kakashi smiled softly, remembering the picture of him when he was 6 years old, Minato. Sensei beside him, smiling broadly, just like Naruto always did. He could still clearly recall how he got to be at that festival. His childish annoyance at being there and wearing that dumb red yukata was captured in the picture to perfection. Minato was given guardianship by the third Hokage soon after his father's passing. How at first he hated the man, constantly trying to make him laugh, smile, or feel happy. He never went away from him to brood in quiet. Back then, he had been such a stubborn child. I never thanked you for what you did for me back then, Sensei. If you had left me to myself like I had asked you so many times back then to do, I would have ended up like my father, dead and alone. The 19-year-old let out a sigh and returned the framed picture he had picked up to its rightful place on the mantel, next to the others. At last gathering himself together, he studied the picture next to the one he'd moved back into place and grinned sourly. Oh, the true cruelty of fate. Kushina was held by Sensei, who had a protective arm around her swollen belly, and they both looked so happy. Naruto had, in a sense, taken a photo with them before they passed away. But that's where the images would end, and they did. Kakashi left the room of eerie memories, feeling the weight of a sorrow he thought he had long since overcome, and carried on exploring the house that had inspired such great hopes for the future. The silver-haired man was shown room after room how wonderful his sensei was and how much he believed in the future. Following the living room, Kakashi entered a lengthy hallway that connected the kitchen, den, and dining room. The dining room exuded a homey feel despite the grandeur of the rest of the estate, thanks to its straightforward design. To the right of the person who would have occupied the family throne, there was even a high chair. The future chair of Sensei. A place where he could unwind following a demanding workday, enjoy a hot meal, and share stories about his day with his loved ones. Just looking at such a basic and interesting thing hurt. He then moved on. Why bother pondering over what might have been? Nevertheless, his sensei had gone all out in the kitchen. Exquisitely designed cabinets and cupboards, polished pantry and shiny sink. Everything had been of the finest quality and was fully supplied with all the kitchen tools and silverware a head chef could ask for. Kakashi chuckled at how predictable his sensei could be at times. He did love to cook. Nevertheless, he did observe that a few of the standard electrical appliances needed to be installed and changed. They were all so very outdated. As soon as Kakashi stepped inside the den, she was struck by how cozy and welcoming the space was. That room was just what you needed on a wet day. It made him think of the tiny room his sensei used to have in their previous apartment. It even featured a large leather sofa with two side reading chairs and a glass coffee table in the center with an unlit candle. There were bookcases all along the walls, and in the middle stood a massive fireplace that was twice as big as the one in the living room. On the mantel of this one, too, were pictures. Kakashi went on exploring, not wanting to take the chance of having another breakdown, but jokingly reminded himself to come back before he went to look at them. To his surprise, the study was the last room on the first floor of the main building, or, equivalently, the sensei's office. Kakashi took a deep breath, released it slowly, and opened the slightly ajar door even further. This was the crucial moment. There was probably something in this room that sensei wanted him to find. He was hit first by the scent. He was able to improve his senses, particularly his sense of smell, thanks to his relationship with dogs. His chakra-enabled nose managed to escape the aromatic blend of coffee and ink. The young Jonin was taken aback by the coffee. How could the aroma of a tiny, cold cup of coffee be so potent? The porcelain cup with the Konoha symbol engraved on its side was gingerly picked up by Kakashi. Sensei must have sealed this place with a time and space-altering jutsu. He pretty much just froze the whole estate for 7 years in the moment he sealed it. Placing it back where it belonged on the shiny mahogany desk, the one-eyed man looked around sadly at the disarray covering the whole wooden surface. If the overturned ink jars and carelessly thrown papers covering the desk and floor were any indication, his sensei was in a hurry. As Kakashi bent down to gather up the jumble of black and white, he understood why his sensei had been rushing. Seals. All those documents had seals on them, both new and incomplete. Several hurried notes. Some with black liquid spilled all over them, making them unusable. That jutsu was created here by his sensei. Here he had passed his final hours on Earth. He struggled to get air. Every exhalation felt like a knife to his unresponsive lungs. He was against this. He had no desire to find out. This simply made the pain even more intense. Why would the Hokage send him to a place where the man who reared him, his teacher, hell, was preparing to commit suicide? Like some of the sealed paper tossed aside, his hopes for the future were torn to pieces. It was simply too brutal. Kakashi struggled to stand up and steady himself, easing himself up on the abandoned desk's edge. The shinobi's hands gripped the wooden surface painfully as he struggled to control his irregular heartbeat. When he lifted his lone, teary eye in that instant, he discovered the one item that would serve as his rock for all time by sweeping the messy desk with an innocent, grief-filled glance. A clean, white, stainless steel envelope was clearly visible on top of the mess. He leaned in closer to get a better look and saw there was another one underneath it. In less than a second, he read the word that had followed him from the moment of his birth, written in the unmistakable, luxurious handwriting of his sensei, Kakashi. It was his envelope. From the sensei. A dark orb grew wider in total wonder and confusion. Kakashi, with his gloved hands, picked up the tightly closed white holder and opened the bottom container to reveal that it was meant for the small blonde thread he had left sleeping soundly in his apartment, the Naruto. Cracking the ageless seal, Kakashi took a folded letter out of the envelope's depths. He was drawn to the writing as his eyes skimmed over the black script addressed to him. The further he went, the silver-haired, 19-year-old, seasoned shinobi wept bittersweet, dejected tears. Tears of salt dampened his mask as they streamed down his face. It said in the letter, "Dear Kakashi, I have no regrets because I did what was necessary to protect my sons in the village, even though reading this means I was able to stop the Kyuubi and am therefore no longer a part of the living world." The final word. Boys. Even after Kakashi read the sentence again, the tears continued to fall freely. No, it wasn't a misread by him. Kakashi continued, removing his headband and setting it on the desk to wipe away the liquid that was seeping from his colored eyes before it could tarnish the priceless item he had been given. Kakashi, I know it hurts, but you have to be strong. My boy, I have one last thing to ask of you. Please take care of Naruto for me. I know he'll be a good man if you're watching over him, but Kushina and I won't get to see what kind of man he grows up to be. I mean, I raised you, isn't that right? Kakashi, I'm proud of you. Even though you are not my biological son, you are still my first son. Keep your head up, Kakashi. Avoid isolating yourself once more. Discover what genuinely brings you joy. I'll be keeping an eye on the two of you from wherever I am. Son, never forget how much I love you, Minato Namikaze. P.S. On the day of his graduation, please give that letter to Naruto at Genin. Additionally, Kakashi, the estate is now yours and Naruto's. I hope the two of you will raise a family here. That is why I built it so big in the first place. I have always wanted a large family. When his real father had passed away, he hadn't cried. He had not cried since Obito's death day, not even like a newborn. He could hardly remember if he had cried at all during the fourth Hokage's village-wide funeral. But now, Kakashi was crying like a lost child and was trying in vain to stop the tears, which seemed to be on the verge of becoming torrents of grief and suffering. Because that was how he was feeling at the time. He was completely disoriented. His father, his teacher, his friend, his savior, was no longer there. He never wept over the Yondaime's passing. And yet, when he fell to the wooden floor of his father's office, all the grief he had been holding inside burst out in bone-jarring sobs. Because they were for the man who had been with him since the day he was abandoned in a world of heartbreaking cruelty, he was unable to contain them. He lay there, utterly broken, pressed up against the desk, crushing the letter to his chest, and lost all sense of time. He went back and read it again. Committed to memory. Etching it in his mind for all time. Even in his last moments, Sensei had been thinking of him. A young man's tear-stained face was adorned with a smile. Kakashi stood up on his dark soles, arms stiff. A shinobi could occasionally be reformed, but they were always broken. Repositioning the headband over his mortal gift, Kakashi tried his hardest to gather his thoughts. A silver head turned back around as he was about to slip out the door, and it looked fondly at the desk with the two letters inside, one sealed and the other opened. I'll bring him soon, Sensei. He is your son after all. My little brother, I vow on your memory that I will watch over him for as long as I'm able. The retired Anbu emerged from that fateful room with a cool, determined look that hardened into his red eyes. He needed to honor his pledge. It was confirmed. He intended to murder him. He was going to be out of a job today, as soon as he fixed this minor issue. It had begun as merely an itching, but it had grown into a full-fledged rash of torture and death. Hey Gar, does this squirrel bite look infected to you? Cause it itches like crazy? Maybe we should find Kakashi. It looks really red. Hell no. It's that bastard's fault I got this in the first place. If he had been faster in helping me out, I wouldn't have been attacked by that stupid squirrel. Naruto immediately attempted to retract his harsh remark after observing Gaara's dejected expression at having his idea rejected. Besides, he's probably out on a mission if he left so early. We should go see the old man. He'll definitely know. Come on. One was worried, and the other was both mildly irritated and furious as they left the ramen stand. Harmless, stupid squirrel. They soon came to the well-known red, tall building, the shinobi headquarters in Konoha. Finding the location wasn't too difficult, but entering it proved to be more difficult. Had Kakashi been present, they would have had no trouble entering. But because of the reputation he had built up over the years, a lot of the ninjas still didn't like to see him around. How can they enter without being noticed by anyone? Hey Gar, follow my lead. I got a plan. With a gesture of total confidence, the 7-year-old crouching down and the tiny red head dropped into the step. Compared to what Naruto had initially believed, it had been much simpler to slip in. It was always this simple when he was alone, but this time, with his little shadow, he had thought it would at least sound the alarm that there were 2 intruders in the Hokage tower, but not a sound. As they continued to creep toward their destination, Naruto thought to himself, man, these ninjas sure are stupid. They would be home free in just a few more steps. However, there was an issue. There were 3 shinobi kicking back a few feet away. It would need to be done quickly. Fast Gar, run for it. A pair of red and gold blurs darted over to the door and slammed it open. The older man, seated at his desk and smoking a pipe, was taken aback when he saw 2 panting boys and then 3 chunins running in after them. One of the startled shinobi cried out, Lord Hokage, are you alright? While putting out a defensive kunai. Hiruzen gave the scene an incredulous look, raising his eyebrows. He sighed deeply and motioned for the 2 boys to approach. It was imperative that he improve academy standards or retrain some of his shinobi. It is alright men, go back to your post. The shinobi realized they had used a kunai on 2 small boys and quickly exited the room, saying sheepishly, yes, sir. After the door had closed tightly behind them, the Hokage's inquisitive gaze was directed only at the blonde boy who was picking at his skin. What's the meaning of your visit, Naruto? You see, old man, I got bit by a squirrel yesterday and now this bite is itching like crazy. What should I do? The young Jinchuriki sobbed, frantically picking at his battle wound. With a puzzled expression on his face, Hiruzen questioned, a squirrel attacked you? And raised an eyebrow. Naruto muttered, it's a long story, as he kept scratching his neck, which was now a bright scarlet from anger. The documents on his desk indicated otherwise, but who was to argue with the most influential man in the village? Well then sit. I have plenty of time. He had not anticipated discovering this. When he had first arrived at his house, he had not expected to find an intact, silent apartment. He had an instinct that the Brats were up to something. If he had to speculate, Naruto was the cause. Gaara was still quite reserved and quiet, but that would undoubtedly change if he spent enough time with the blonde threat. Kakashi quietly pushed open his door and peered inside, waiting for Naruto to set off one of his traps. However, as the seconds passed, there was no chaos, no gunfire, nothing. This was obviously not right. Naruto? Gaara? After inspecting every room in his compact apartment, he reached a horrifying realization. They had vanished. He was relieved to find or not find that Gaara's mask and the cloak he had been wearing the day before had vanished as well. Now, where did they go? Rolling his eyes at the obvious response, Kakashi struck his palm against his forehead. Ramen. Anywhere else? The silver-haired Jonin smiled, masked, and vanished in a puff of smoke, only to reappear in front of a startled pair of ramen cooks. Tucci sir, have you seen Naruto and a boy with a mask come by? They were here a couple of hours ago, but I think they said they were going to go see the old man. I don't really know who they were talking about however. Kakashi nodded, understanding, and grinned, saying, no, you have been very helpful, thank you. The older ramen vendor told the irate shinobi, oh before you go, Naruto said you'll pay for their food, with a kind smile. As the Jonin reached for his wallet, one visible eye rolled in frustration, saying, of course he did. These days, it was beginning to feel lighter than usual. Brat's mad about ramen. After paying the bill at the well, known ramen stand, Kakashi went in search of the next hint as to where his two charges might be. A person with silver hair poked his head through an open window, choosing not to bother going through the door. "Yo, Lord Hokage, have Naruto and Gaara come by?" Hiruzen glared angrily at the squatting figure on his windowsill, infuriated by the unexpected arrival of one of his shinobi. "There is a door, yes, but this is much more convenient. So have they by any chance?" Kakashi sheepishly said, laughing. "They were here about 2 or 3 hours ago," the Hokage sighed, returning to his paperwork review. "Why even make an effort? That long, huh? Did they say where they were heading?" The Honorable Hokage leaned back in his chair and hummed to himself a little, tapping his chin with a finger. "Now that you mention it, yes. Naruto spoke about showing Gaara his favorite place. Any idea what that could be?" "Yes, I believe so. Well, thank you for your help, sir, bye." Kakashi, in his usual way, vanished from the windowsill and dashed across the rooftops. "So you're there again." With the heads of their beloved past and present Hokage engraved on it, the mountain that towered over the village was concealed by a leaf. More than the ramen stand, that was the one location that Naruto cherished. The stone head of the fourth Hokage. There were two little figures in the distance that he could see as he got closer to the impending landmark. The silver-haired man arrived silently and approached the two boys he was looking for with composure. He was surprised and annoyed to find one of them sound asleep. While the smaller companion sat calmly staring out into the distance, Naruto sprawled out on top of the stony face like a golden starfish. "It's a beautiful place, isn't it?" The red Jinchuriki, who was daydreaming, was startled by the abrupt deep baritone voice. "Oh, Kakashi, it's you. Yes, it is very beautiful." As the older man sat next to Gaara, settling a blonde figure into his lap, she could hear him shifting and shuffling. As the minutes passed, neither of the two spoke. The stillness that descended was strangely comforting even though it wasn't frightening. "Do you regret leaving Suna?" The abrupt silence caused his train of thought to pause. The boy with the raccoon eyes peered questioningly towards the horizon, seemingly searching for the answer. Did he feel bad about it? No, it felt like a heavy weight had been abruptly removed from his shoulders when he realized this. "Good. Naruto would have been very upset if you didn't want to stay here, so would I." The last words uttered startled the Jinchuriki. Was he really this way? Two confused teal eyes turned to face the man. He wanted to cry and weep like the child he should have been at what he saw there. Even with only one eye making the gesture, a warm smile could be just as heartwarming as one without. Taking him in was Kakashi. The boy who everyone feared had discovered two priceless individuals. They observed the sun ascending higher and higher into the afternoon sky without exchanging words. But urgent issues had to be resolved shortly. Despite his desire to stay in that serene spot, Kakashi had to move his two little charges to a new house. The silver-haired man got up and said softly, "It's getting late. We have to get few things packed that I have in my apartment in Naruto's. So come Gaara." He held a blonde lump in his arms. Gaara stood up, too, his head cocked to one side in confusion. What items required packing? "Why do we have to pack?" As he adjusted Naruto in his arms, the silver-haired man said nonchalantly, "I have another home we're going to be living in. Other than the one Naruto blew up." With a chuckle, Kakashi nodded his head and set off towards the village along the well-trod path. Gaara trailed silently behind and started thinking about his situation. He had been contemplating it, in fact, the entire day. He looked up at the taller man next to him, unwilling to stay in the dark any longer. "Kakashi, what am I?" The Jonin stopped walking, startled. His one open eye narrowing slightly, he studied the little red kid. "What do you mean? You're Gaara, aren't you?" Kakashi asked in response, trying to sound upbeat and lighthearted. Gaara shook his head and turned to face forward, avoiding eye contact with the man who had saved him. "I was back in Suna, but here I must be someone else, right?" The silver-headed man's shoulders relaxed slightly in relief as he continued to walk, clearly understanding. "Oh, so that's what has you so serious. Well, as soon as the paperwork is done, officially you'll be named Garakan Hitaki. In this way, you have a little resemblance to your given name. Plus, Naruto already screwed it up, so calling you Gaara is our best bet at the moment." As I processed the data, one particular piece stuck out above the rest. "I have your last name." Humming to himself, Kakashi nodded slowly and turned to face the younger boy, grinning. "I guess this means I'm gonna be your new big brother," he said. Gaara froze in his place, wide-eyed. Is that what he just said? "Big brother?" he said in a hardly audible voice. Kakashi had to crouch down in front of the sleeping Naruto in order to get a comfortable eye contact with the redhead that was shocked by the shell. I know that we barely know each other, but Naruto is family to me and he has taken in you as his own little brother. So that makes you mine as well. Gaara merely nodded, fighting back the tears that threatened to fall because he didn't trust his voice. That was when he knew that fateful night in Suna had been the right choice. Kakashi turned to face the child and said, "Well, we're really running out of time here, so how about I carry you on my back? This way we get to my apartment much sooner." The redhead, sensing the silent order, took a comfortable seat on his new elder brother's broad back. As soon as he was properly positioned, the wind started to tousle his short hair, and images of buildings and trees passed by at breakneck speed. Being so fast that everything seemed to be stopping was an incredible experience. Was this a shinobi's strength and skill? Gaara struggled against the whipping winds and managed to say, "I feel as if I'm flying." The laughs vibrated against his chest at such incredible speeds that he felt them more than heard them. "Yeah, I said the same thing to my sensei and he was even faster than me." The way the silver-haired man talked about the past, the child could hear the nostalgia. Beneath that term, there is suffering and agony. Sensei. He held significance for him. When Gaara noticed that Kakashi had seemingly gone into autopilot and that his mind was not with him as they bounded through the evening day, he decided it was best to say nothing. Nevertheless, the quiet was fleeting as the ride abruptly came to an end. They had returned safely to the apartment. As he hurried through the door holding a blonde lump safely in his arms, Kakashi thought, "Well, there isn't much for you to pack, Gaara, now is there?" He walked out of the room and left Gaara on his own after putting Naruto down on his couch. Alone in the chamber with a sleeping blonde, Gaara wondered how he could lend a hand with the packing. Looking around the room, he saw that Kakashi was well organized and likely knew exactly what he needed and didn't need. He made the decision to wait for more instructions while patiently sitting next to the boy who was snoring loudly. He didn't have to wait long, though, because a few minutes after he had sat down, Kakashi came briskly into the living room. In one arm's arch were multiple scrolls, and in the other were 3 medium-sized black backpacks. After setting one of the packs and several scrolls in front of him on top of the coffee table, Kakashi knelt down once more to focus his one remaining eye on the boy who was still awake. "Alright Gaara, I'm going to head over to Naruto's apartment and grab a few things. I would like it if you would pack some things for me while I'm gone. Can you do that for me?" "Yes." Kakashi stood up, a crinkle in his eye, and motioned for the boy to follow him. Kakashi led the redhead into one of the several rooms in his spacious apartment and pointed to the cabinets and closet. "In my closet, if you would grab some of my shinobi vest and take them to the living, I'll show you what I need for you to do." With caution, Gaara placed the 3 green vests next to the packs and scrolls on the coffee table after picking up the prescribed clothing with his smaller arms. Following him, Kakashi picked up multiple shirts and pants and layered them on top of the vest. "Okay, now comes the fun part. Gaara, hand me one of those scrolls, will ya?" After accepting the offering parchment, Kakashi unfolded it to show a curious red-headed person a number of intriguing symbols written on it. "Pay close attention, this is a sealing scroll. We will pack the majority of the stuff in these. It is very simple to use." When Kakashi touched the seal with a hand that was capable of using chakra, a tiny cloud of white smoke materialized. The scroll was all that was left when the smoke cleared. "Amazing. How did you do that?" "It's simple sealing techniques. Storage and small explosives are actually beginner seals and don't require much chakra control, so you should be able to use them with little problem. If you like, I could teach you." "Really?" The one-eyed man answered in a bittersweet tone. "Yeah, I was the student of the most famous sealing master. So I know a thing or two, but nowhere near what my sensei could do." Kakashi decided it was safe enough to leave the 2 boys alone after Gaara used a scroll and some books for a few practice runs. He then went to collect the few items Naruto kept in his own apartment. After the man left through the door, Gaara started to gather the items that Kakashi had asked him to take and put them in the storage seals before moving toward the other room. It had taken him a few attempts to successfully grasp the fundamentals of sealing. When Naruto woke up, he discovered him doing this. A blonde boy, who was yawning and rubbing his eyes to get rid of the grogginess that comes with waking up, asked, "Gaara? What are you doing?" "Packing." The little redhead answered as he went about his job. With his sleep rapidly fading, Naruto approached the boy with his head cocked to the side in confusion, asking, "Packing? For what?" Gaara clarified as he began rearranging things. "Kakashi says we're going to live in a different house." "Seriously?" "Yes," Naruto asked as he scanned the apartment for the silver Haired Jonin, well, where is he? At your apartment. What? Why is he there? He is packing your things. With a sly smile, the blonde scratched the back of his head and said, oh, well, want some help? All the soon a boy could do in response was smile. Oh good, you're up. The two Jinchuriki who had just completed their final task were startled when the voice of a certain one-eyed man suddenly rang through the room. You also completed all of the packing. Well done. This will save us a significant amount of time. He proceeded inside and placed a black sack on the floor next to the door. Well, that ought to be all we require at this time. Don't worry, Gaara. I'll take you to get some clothes later. Boys, follow me. Kakashi gave each boy a dark, black backpack filled with scrolls that was also filled with other items that he hadn't bothered to seal. The silver-headed man lifted his own over his shoulder and led the way out of his apartment. So, where is this place? With a happy chirp, Naruto walked beside the tall man, Gaara by his side. It's a surprise, but once we get there, don't go barging in again, Kakashi replied with a smile. I would really hate to see this place burn down. Naruto blushed a little and gave a sheepish nod, nor did he want to see what had happened to the other house happen again. He was still being affected by the guilt. The three of them strolled through the afternoon streets in relative silence. As they pressed on, the narrow roads, clogged with both civilians and shinobi, became less frequent. After a while of moving forward, seemingly aimlessly, the area started to make sense with every building that went by. The district of the ninja clan was this. He must have another house around here. Naruto thought to himself while walking with his two friends, but instead of following the main road that connected all the clan compounds, Kakashi led them off the path and into the densely forested area that surrounded Konoha as well as the clan homes. The red-haired and blonde head looked at each other questioningly, then hurried to catch up to the leader, who had not appeared to notice his two charges falling behind in their bewilderment. Hey, brother, where are we going? The taller of the two little boys asked, his shorter feet straining to keep up with the man with the silver hair's longer strides. To our new home. Well, yeah, but there's no houses out here. Kakashi grinned at the two, looking down over his shoulder at their response, then said, oh, there is. The three reached the edge of the tree line just as the more irate of the boys was ready to dispute the response. Hundreds of tall oaks, maples, and whatever other native species called Konoha homes surrounded a vast clearing. The blonde, naive Jinchuriki was puzzled because it seemed that this would be their last stop. Good, we're here. Kakashi grinned and began to search through the inside pockets of his vest. With a wide smile on his face, Naruto turned to face the highly amused Jonin. How the heck? Nothing is present here. You're right. The little whiskered boy was even more frustrated when a silver head nodded in agreement. The blonde was about to yell out in frustration at the state of affairs when Kakashi interrupted, saying, there's nothing here, yet. With a practiced ease, the young Jonin strode out towards the center of the clearing, emphasizing the yet. I want you all to remain there, close to the edge of the trees. Keep still. Kakashi pulled a scroll from the inside of his forest green vest and started to unfold it, assuring himself that the two would heed his warning and that none had moved to follow him. Laying the scroll down on the lawn, Kakashi withdrew to the spot where he had stood earlier, beside the two confused boys. With curious looks in his eyes, the boys watched Kakashi sign, release. An enormous cloud of white smoke descended upon the previously empty clearing at the command. WH. What's going on? Shouting in terror, Naruto held up a trembling hand in front of him to shield himself from the unidentified smoke. Two hands as small as his own trembled as they gripped the collar of his orange jacket. Never fear. This is our new residence. As he began to move toward the center of the cloud, Kakashi gave comfort. Gathering the bravery, Naruto took a deep breath, grasped one of Gaara's unsteady hands that had attached itself to him, and proceeded to follow the man with the silver head. Gaara silently followed the blonde's lead, clutching the hand that held him securely. As the enigmatic white cloud gradually disappeared into the afternoon air, neither of the two young boys anticipated what lay behind it. Whoa! The small redhead nodded in silent agreement at Naruto's breathless wonder. When the two boys first laid eyes on the magnificent estate, Kakashi sensed their wonder and awe. The thought that Naruto shouldn't be seeing his true home, his damn birthright, until now, 7 years after the death of his own father, made him feel a little ache in his chest as he followed their stunned looks. If not for that fateful night, this estate should never have been vacated, he thought sardonically. With a bitter sigh, Kakashi waved away the negative thoughts, realizing that he could no longer live in the past. He needed to move on from it permanently. He needed to put the lost man from the past behind him. His errors, his remorse, his grief. He would not be able to fulfill his promise if he held on to any of that. If Naruto stayed the same, the blonde boy would never experience true joy, but he would still be happy. I will find my happiness and tranquility for you, Sensei, and for Naruto. I now understand that he will never be able to find true happiness as long as he believes I am not. That boy worries too much about other people's lack of worry. Glancing once more at the bearded child, a look of pure joy and wonder lighting up his bright, tan face, Kakashi thought fondly and smiled. The 19-year-old shinobi needed no further confirmation than to glance at the small red head next to him. The most compassionate, loving, and fiercely determined person he had ever met was Naruto, the blonde practical joker. The shinobi world will either make him more powerful or it will completely destroy him. An icy steel turned a soft gaze toward the misguided thought. In certain cases, Naruto was too compassionate. I will, however, be present to ensure that he finds his way. Senti, your son will receive excellent care. The wind blew the three lost souls a gentle, almost loving, kiss just as he was about to swear in silence. Namikaze. Wave and wind. The Jonin let out a soft sigh and felt calmness settle over him for the first time in a very long time. Being there at that precise moment felt right. Now, this was his goal. Man. This place is huge. The sudden outburst from Naruto startled the shinobi out of his reverie. Returning attention to the pair of ogling boys, Kakashi grinned, a crinkle appearing in the only visible eye. It is, indeed. Are you fond of it? Enjoy it? I adore it so much, this location is fantastic. Kakashi laughed a little and nodded accordingly. I'm glad you feel that way. Alright, how about we head inside? Gaara and Naruto noticed that the doors lacked a handle or even a doorknob as the three got closer to the entrance. The Jonin gave Kakashi a curious glance and grinned slightly in comprehension. I see you noticed that there is no doorknob. Well, obviously, thus, how are we supposed to enter? With confusion written in his deep blue eyes, Naruto exclaimed. Kakashi replied, flashing his famous eye. Smile while holding up his index finger. Naturally, with a chakra. After all, this is a shinobi estate. The redhead, who had observed their previous exchange, seemed to be considering something. Chakra. Watch closely what I'm about to do, alright. Kakashi approached a platinum silver plate hanging to the right of the dark wooden double-door entrance after noticing the two boys nod. The two looked at the tasteful engraving on the fine metal. Hi. Hold on a minute. That clearly says Namikaze. The silver-haired Jonin stopped in his tracks and froze. If nothing else, he had hoped Naruto wouldn't have been as perceptive. Curse my good teaching skills. As Kakashi was criticizing himself in his head, Gaara's teal eyes widened in shock. Namikaze? That was the Yondaime's name, wasn't it? One of the heroes from the book I read last night that Kakashi gave me? The young man wearing the mask resumed his previous actions and placed his hand, slightly infused with chakra, on the metal plate before the raccoon-eyed boy had a chance to ask his questions. A flash of light glowed on the plate and directed toward the doors, which opened instantly, as though by a hand that was not visible. Whoa! That is really awesome. With a sparkle in his eyes, Naruto exclaimed in shock. He dismissed his earlier statement, overcome with glee at the wonder of the magical entrance. Dude, I'm eager to step inside. The blonde ninja.in. Training darted through the doors and into the stunning estate, not stopping for more orders. His exclamations of admiration as he left his two companions outside further inspired the other two to follow at a much more leisurely pace. When Gaara saw the splendor of his new house, his doubts were quickly forgotten, along with the blonde's smile. This place is even more awesome on the inside. The brothers in their own right couldn't have agreed more. At last, they were at home. Where's my room? Naruto, you can make that decision for yourself. Boys, feel free to explore, but if you come across a locked room, please don't try to enter without my permission. Before the two could venture out and explore independently, Kakashi gave them a warning. Yeah, we hear ya. Swiftly answering over his shoulder, Naruto dashed across the spacious living room, racing to find the bedrooms. But the redhead hadn't followed the blonde's boisterous example. Rather, the pictures that were arranged on the fireplace had drawn Gaara's attention. The little boy had to squint as he walked up to them in order to see the pictures on the wooden frames clearly. That's you as a boy, isn't it? Kakashi's eye followed the redhead's gaze and fell upon the photo of him and his sensei. The same image that had made him cry hours earlier. The young Jonin lifted it up gently once more and sighed softly before giving the photo to the interested boy. Yes, that man there was my sensei. He looks like Naruto. Kakashi laughed at the absurd irony of the whole thing at the innocent, basic remark. A 5-year-old boy from a different nation had witnessed the one thing that the shinobi and people of Konoha were blind to. Their legacy, their priceless Yondaime, his own child. He does, doesn't he? The man with silver hair answered with a wistful mutter. Gaara narrowed his eyes a little at the picture he was holding and came to a shocking conclusion. Is this his father? Even though it was only a small movement, it was sufficient to determine that he had made the right guess. Unconsciously, Kakashi's body tensed at the question. This was the crucial moment. It was time to move on from this. I know you're there, Naruto. Leave now, we need to talk. As soon as the Jonin finished speaking, a boy with blonde hair and whiskers emerged from the corner of the door that led to the hallway where he had vanished earlier. His little fists were tightly balled up at his sides. The red-headed inquirer was taken aback by his appearance and widened his eyes in fear. So you heard, didn't you? Naruto just nodded in response, not believing what he was saying. The answer to your question, Gaara, is yes. Kakashi turned back to face the fireplace mantle and removed one more frame from it as he was saying those fateful words. Naruto, these are your parents. The most amazing couple I've ever had the pleasure of knowing. He gave the astonished young man a picture of a happy, blonde man and a happy, red-headed pregnant woman. Naruto couldn't contain his tears of salt upon seeing the couple as he took the picture with trembling hands. They were his parents. Restraining a sob, Naruto inquired, is that me? Within her stomach? The ex. And who appeared to have a hole burned in his soul due to the large blue orbs filled with tears. Kakashi nodded, understandably saddened, realizing that the boy's emotional dam had burst. The Jonin knelt down in front of the boy and encircled his slender, quivering frame with his arms. He was never good at this kind of thing, but if he wasn't going to give the boy his shoulder to weep on, then damn it all. The bone-cracking sobs that had torn at the war-hardened shinobi's heart subsided after a few moments to sniffles. Are you all right? Naruto said softly, yeah, wiping the last of the tears from his red, swollen eyes. Raising the abandoned photograph from the spot where it had dropped to the floor amid the chaos, Kakashi pointed to the blonde. Do you know who this is? Naruto gave the man a serious look and shook his head. Kakashi went on, grinning with amusement, you don't. You passed out earlier today on top of his head. Two pairs of eyes widened in realization at the hint. Gaara, who had not spoken before, gasped with sudden comprehension. He's the fourth Hokage. His silent thoughts were easily overheard by the other two people in the room. You're correct. The Yondaime Hokage, Minato Namikaze. No way. The fourth Hokage is my dad? Naruto let out an incredulous cry. A silver head nodded, a melancholy smile in his eye. That's right. That's so. Awesome. The blue eyes, which had been filled with tears before, were now glistening with happy excitement. How about her? What's the name of my mother? Kakashi looked back at the woman with the red hair and laughed quietly, seeing her personality come through in her son now more than ever. They were never able to be defeated by anything. Hey, sensei. Kushina Uzumaki was her name. Among the best was Akunoichi. She went by the moniker, the Red Hot Habanero, believe it or not. The information about his birth parents made Naruto's eyes seem even wider, almost like an owl. Whoa, she sounds so cool. You and her are very much alike. We are? Blonde questioned incredulously. Yes, but we'll have to save that for a later date. I assured the Hokage that you would be in school the following day, even though it is now very late. Kakashi put a hand behind his head and sheepishly admitted. What? But I still have stuff to unpack. Naruto complained, wishing he could avoid going to what he considered to be the most boring place. He simply wasn't meant to remain motionless for an extended period of time. After you get back from the academy tomorrow, you can finish that. Do you not wish to become a ninja? With fresh vigor, two fists raised, saying, hell yeah, more than ever, right now. I'm going to surpass all other Hokages and bring my father great pride. It's true, believe it. The childish declaration seemed unquestionable to Kakashi, especially with the determined gleam in his blue eyes. That's the spirit, but there is one thing I want both of you to promise me, okay? No one, and I mean absolutely no one, can know who your parents are, Kakashi said after observing the two boys nod. Naruto understood? Why? Asked Gaara. If word spread that my sensei had a son, he would have gained a lot of enemies. Naruto, I fear that you will be in great danger. You have your mother's maiden name instead of your father's for this reason, among other reasons. With narrowed eyes, the boy with blonde hair nodded gradually, seemingly reaching a conclusion. Okay, we'll keep it a secret from one another. A secret between brothers. That's a good way of putting it. Kakashi laughed and rose from his kneeling position. I promise Naruto, when you get back tomorrow, I'll tell anything you want to know about them, but for now it's time to get some rest. As the two boys turned to leave the living room, Naruto leapt to his feet and caught a small red head that was startled. A bearded visage faced the bewildered and terrified shinobi as they stood near the entrance. Did you know that Gaara can't sleep? Startled by the inquiry, Kakashi looked at the two confusedly before responding, yeah, why not? The blonde nodded and scowled a little, as though expressing disdain. Why didn't you speak up? All this time, Gaara has been awake by himself. Kakashi grinned warmly at the picture of the boy with golden hair, amazed once more at his justified rage. Is that what's agitating you all? Don't worry too much. If you get angry too much, you'll end up looking like an old man. You are the only elderly person I see here. However, the elderly Hokage mentioned that one of his students was on his way to assist Gaara. Is that accurate? Kakashi, more perplexed by the question, raised an eyebrow. Why do you ask me that question? Do you not believe the Hokage? With a sheepish expression, Naruto shook his head and met the shinobi's questioning dark eyes. Well yes, but you're my brother, so if you say it's true then it has to be. Never would he stop trying to amaze him. Kakashi gave the boy who had managed to get a permanent hold on his broken heart a tender glance and gently tousled his spiky blonde hair. Yes, that is accurate. Hopefully, he will arrive in a few days. Gaara, we'll do our best to keep you company until then. So please be patient with us. The redhead struggled to control her tears as attention was focused on him. He was always able to feel so loved and cared for by these two people. Gaara felt taken aback by the pair's smiles as she nodded. Now, this was his place to live. He wanted to be where those two went at all times. That's fine with you then. It's getting late. In a moment, I'll be joining you all. The young Jonin fell to his knees as the two eventually left the room, beaming with tears. His body felt like lead from all the emotions racing through him, so he was surprised that they kept him alive for so long. I hope I made the right choice in telling him. His one remaining eye looked up at the mantel, where all the photos lay flat once more. This was his second opportunity. Naruto's loud, boisterous voice reverberated throughout the opulent estate, as he could hear. Hearing that there felt so appropriate. At last, the missing piece had been located and put in its proper place. Now this was home. Big brother, being at home felt good. At last, the bell had rung. A shrill scream marking the end of a long, dark day of suffering. A shout stopped Yellow Torpedo in his tracks as he was about to leave the crowded room. Naruto. Ah. Iruka. Sensei. The boy asked, turning to face a Chunin who appeared mildly irritated. Just where did you think you were going? Home, I guess. Naruto said, looking puzzled and scratching his chin in response. Iruka scolded, holding up a waving finger. No, you're not. You missed a lot of days this week, so you're going to stay afterwards and finish the coursework. But, as he steered the stuttering boy toward a seat at the front of the class rather than his typical one near the back, where he usually sat next to Shikamaru and Choji, Iruka interrupted, saying, no buts about it, mister. I'm surprised you actually did the homework assignments, but that doesn't mean you get to skip out on the lessons that go along with them, he went on to say. Now, this will be quick as long as you stay focused, alright? Well then, let's begin. Tell me what you know about the first Hokage. The scarred Chunin turned his back and started writing on the chalkboard, but he didn't see his one and only student throw his pencil at a pile of erasers, which hit the floor with a clatter and created a white, dusty cloud that filled the classroom. Iruka coughed and spun around again, glaring angrily at the scruffy kid who was desperately trying not to look like a fool. Naruto. Enough games and pay attention or else I'll make this incredibly long and give you extra homework. The blonde mischief maker began copying the sentences the Chunin had written on the board, muttering, geez, alright. You're no fun, Iruka. Sensei. The young instructor sighed with fatigue and went back to teaching. A few blocks away from the previously mentioned academy, in the meantime, an orange-clad figure leapt through the crowded afternoon streets, running into unwary people without a second thought and laughing heartily the entire time. Huh? Shadow clones are the coolest things ever. 3 kids were alerted to his boisterous laughter as it reverberated through the streets, and they immediately went in search of the source. With a sigh from her friend with apple hair, Ino remarked out loud. That sounded like Naruto. With a slump against an electrical pole made of wood, Shikamaru continued, yeah, he's always loud. It's hard to miss the idiot. Choji added, munching on what seemed like an endless supply of barbecue chips. I thought Iruka Sensei made him stay after school? Before either of the other two could respond to the young Akamichi's question, someone else informed the group. A recognizable voice exclaimed, yup, he did, but I'm not about to stay locked up at school doing boring schoolwork. As the boy in question fell from a nearby roof and landed in front of his shocked friends. His tan whiskers revealed a trademark foxy grin that said, sup, guys? Naruto, when you suddenly appear, shouldn't you be at the academy with Iruka Sensei? Ino questioned. With a cunning smile, Naruto shot back, who says I'm not? Shocked by the suggestion, the blonde trainee Kunoichi exchanged glances with her male allies before turning her attention back to the conceited boy. Don't be silly, Whiskers. You can't be in two places at once. It's impossible. Yeah, well I can. Wanna see? Shikamaru asked as a pair of dark brown eyes brightened with sudden interest. Did you learn a new jutsu or something? Naruto smirked as he moved a few feet apart from the group and gestured with his hands, saying, watch this. Shadow clone jutsu. Twin mirror images of a smug-looking boy wearing orange stood side by side as the white cloud broke up. Whoa, unbelievable. There's two of you? Ino asked, prodding the doppelganger unknown currency-inger, who giggled in response. He's solid too. You gotta teach me how to do this, Whiskers. Naruto blushed at the attention he was not used to receiving and realized instantly how his boasting had placed him. Dang it. Kakashi told me not to do the jutsu around others. I'm so dead if he finds out. The blonde started to scratch the back of his head nervously and laughed, saying, well you see. I'm not actually supposed to let anyone know I can do this. Then why did you show us? Ino questioned, glaring at the sheepish-looking boy with a thin blonde brow. I kinda forgot I'm not supposed to. The three of them sighed together, idiot. Shikamaru thought to himself as he started poking the copy in the forehead. Besides that, where did you learn it? It looks like a pretty advanced form of the regular clone jutsu since it's solid instead of it being an illusion. Promise to keep it a secret? The three of them nodded slowly, surprised at the beseeching expression in his blue eyes. Alright. I was taught by a ninja who saw that I couldn't do the regular clone jutsu we're taught in the academy. His friends saw through his admission that what he had said was genuine. It was one jutsu in particular that Naruto always had trouble with. The only other student in the class who failed was him. Continuing, he told me I couldn't do it because I have too much katra and not enough control over it. Sighing at his poor grammar, Ino corrected him, chakra, not katra. Yeah that, chakra. So anyways he taught me it so I can at least know a clone jutsu for the academy exams and stuff. But he said that I could only do it around him where others couldn't see cause he's not supposed to teach it to me or something like that. Naruto continued. The young heir of Nara hummed as he considered the new puzzle in front of him. So you're saying that some ninja just taught you an advanced form of a jutsu, but says you can't do it in public? Naruto said with a carefree smile, yeah pretty much. Ino continued, unconsciously expressing what her companions were thinking when she said, that sounds pretty fishy to me. Shikamaru pondered to the others. There has to be something about that jutsu that makes it dangerous for you not to do it around others. With his eyes narrowed in focus, Naruto attempted to recall the additional details Kakashi had shared with him regarding that jutsu. Well, from what I remember, it takes a whole lot of katra. I mean chakra to use and not many can do it because of it. That's why it isn't taught in the academy. The genius with the black hair grinned triumphantly and snapped his fingers. That's it. Confusion enveloped the others as they exchanged curious glances before turning to face the boy with the pineapple-colored hair. Naruto asked with a tilt of his head, what's it? Yeah Shika. What are you talking about? Shikamaru repeated, that jutsu. You said it takes a lot of chakra, right Naruto? The boy with whiskers nodded, though he was still a little confused by the genius's line of reasoning. It probably takes so much chakra that if you don't have enough, you can get what's called chakra exhaustion. If you lose too much chakra you could die. Shikamaru was the smart one among their friends because of this. All of that could have been put together by someone as intelligent as him. He explained his logic, and Choji and Ino nodded in agreement. Conversely, Naruto had turned completely white. Hey Naruto, you alright? Shikamaru inquired, worried about the look on his face. The shocked blonde whimpered, so you're telling me that I could have died? The genius with black hair slowly shook his head in agreement, bewildered. Naruto exploded, the only warning sign being a twitch of his eyebrow. That bastard, why didn't he warn me? I could have died. I'm so gonna kill him the next time I see him. His rambunctious, agitated tirade was interrupted by a giggle. Turning to face the source, the enraged blonde noticed his fellow blonde was having difficulty controlling her laughter. What's so funny? After she caught her breath, Ino grinned broadly in response. You're a dummy. That guy who taught you did say not to do it without him there, didn't he? Naruto could feel the blood rush to his face, his anger completely gone. He was warned by Kakashi. Naruto sighed and crossed his arms across his chest, pouting. Yeah, whatever. I'm still gonna kill him. Anyways, I don't know why I bother asking, but did you leave one of those clones of yours with Iruka? Sensei? Shikamaru replied. The blonde snickered. Yup, that poor sucker. The youthful Nara shook his head pityingly and sighed. Aw, man, you really are an idiot, aren't you? Wah. What's that supposed to mean, Shikamaru? You just said so yourself. That the Jonin who taught you the clone jutsu said for others not to find out, right? Yeah, Iruka. Sensei is a high-level ninja, a chunin, I think. He'll probably figure it out that it's a clone with him instead of the real deal. See what I mean now? Oh. Crap. As she watched a spiky head of hair slump in defeat before emerging with hopeful sparkling blue orbs, Ino added, yeah, definitely an idiot whiskers. Well, what should I do now? You're the smart one, Shikamaru, help a brother out. Yeah, let me think, alright. Choji, who was sitting on the ground a few feet away from the others eating his food, mused, oh, he's in that pose again. When Ino noticed that Shikamaru had taken a seat next to Choji on the floor in a contemplative state, she asked, so anyways, who's the guy who taught you Naruto? And once again focused on the worried looking boy with whiskers. He was happy to boast about his brother to someone else, so he dismissed his worries at the question. Oh, him. His name's Kakashi. He's so super cool. You guys should meet him sometime when he isn't on a mission or something. Sure. Think he'll teach me that clone jutsu if I ask? How about let's not let him know that I showed you guys the jutsu cause I really don't want to get on his bad side. Oh, fine. But when you're allowed to do it in front of others you have to teach it to me. Whiskers. Deal? Ino sighed and pouted at his beseeching puppy dog eyes. Yeah, it's a deal, Ino. As she started to leave, Ino waved and said, now that that's settled. It's getting kinda late, so we should be going, guys. We'll see y'all later, Naruto. The other two boys slowly got up. I'll let you know if I think of something, alright. Next time just be more careful and don't go showing off at the academy either. It's way too troublesome to have that kind of attention. Believe me. Well, see y'all later. Yeah, bye, Naruto. The blonde boy was left to reflect on his predicament as Shikamaru and Choji walked behind their female counterparts back to their houses. Geez, this is what I get for showing off. Hopefully Iruka Sensei hasn't noticed anything. His melancholy thoughts were abruptly interrupted by the bear call of a particular lower organ. Naruto moaned as he made his way to his apartment, saying, aw man, I'm starving. But I don't got any money left for ramen. Great. He discovered two shocking facts when he got to his dilapidated home. Apart from his worn-out furniture, most of his belongings were missing, which infuriated the young blonde. Secondly, there was no food in the refrigerator. Hey, where's my stuff? A light bulb went off in his head at the exclamation. Oh, yeah. I live with Kakashi and Gaara now. Man, I can't believe I forgot. With no time to spare, a yellow torpedo shot out of the doorway, slamming the wooden door in its path as it raced towards the clan's district. Naruto was on its way. He saw a very familiar face as he was about to turn the corner leading to the district's main road. Hey, you. Wait. The person in question stopped moving and stopped where it was. Finally approaching, Naruto asked the figure in front of him, what happened? What are you talking about, boss? Boss. As he waited for orders, the figure dressed in orange stated, yeah, you're the original. So you're the boss. Naruto dismissed the strange title, bewildered by the turn of events, and said, well, okay. So what happened with Iruka Sensei? Oh, that. He just made me write a bunch of notes and said that there will be a quiz next time in class, so to go over whatever he said. As his twin slapped him on the back in sympathy, Naruto groaned. A quiz? This sucks. Now I have to study. Don't sweat it, boss. You'll be fine. I'll tell you everything you need to know, plus you got the notes I wrote. Really? The blonde asked, her hopes restored. The clone's whiskered face broke into a big mirrored smile that said, yup, so shouldn't we be getting to the estate now? Yeah, that's where I was going. The two carried on their conversation and gradually resumed their slower walk towards their new residence. Wait, just now you're going home. Naruto began, taking care to omit the part about having accidentally gone to his apartment. Well, I ran into Shikamaru, Ino, and Choji a while back, so yeah. But his clone was wise to his trick and gave him a narrowed stare. Say boss, you didn't go to the apartment by mistake, did ya? Unconsciously tensing up, Naruto started laughing shyly. What, me? No. The clone piled on as the two entered the thick forest and nearly non-existent path leading up to the clearing. Yeah, whatever, you so did. In a defensive tone, the original blonde responded, well, I had to pick something up. But the clone saw right through the blatant deception as well and shook his head in embarrassment. No way the original could have been that dumb. Well, where is it? Where's what? The thing you had to pick up, boss. Panicked, blue oceanic eyes suddenly widened. Oh, that. I couldn't find it. Huh. When his clone started making fun of him, Naruto snapped, you know what? Just drop it already. The doppelganger unknown currency-inger smirked and said, sure, whatever you say, boss. It's not my fault you're an idiot. Hey, I thought I was the boss here, don't go disrespecting me. I can do as I want, why you little? The argument between the bearded boys was interrupted by a deep baritone voice just as one of them was about to lunge at the other. Naruto. Kakashi. Hi, a silver-haired Jonin stood in front of the quarreling twins, unimpressed. With a cool, stern look, he eyed them and asked, what did I say about making clones? Naruto was caught with his hands in the cookie jar once more, and he started to scratch the back of his head nervously. Oh not to make more than 10 at a time? Besides that, and you know very well what I'm referring to. Before the original could respond, the clone said, Big Brother said not to make us without him around. Naruto, enraged, gave his clone a stern look and said, yeah, I know. Don't butt in. I can say what I want. You know, if you're going to keep being this annoying, I'll break the jutsu. The copy gasped and looked up in shock at his creator, saying, you wouldn't dare. Try me, faker. It's on now, boss. With a sigh, Kakashi was giving his sensei a silent thank you for not having twins. Alright, I don't know what's going on here, but Naruto, why is your clone so? What's the word I'm looking for? The Jonin said before the two got into a full-fledged brawl. Annoying. Awesome. No, that's not it. Kakashi said, quickly realizing what he was thinking of. Individualistic. The two blondes echoed in confusion. Say what? Your clone. I've never seen a clone have its own train of thought before. It's obvious he knows that he's not the original, but he can still think for himself. It's quite bizarre, actually. Naruto muttered in frustration, it's a pain in the neck if you ask me. Now then, why did you create the clone in the first place? Panic set in again, and Naruto found it difficult to come up with a plausible explanation. Well, you see, what happened was that, When the clone saw that his creator was not responding, he made the decision to inform the Jonin. Boss didn't want to stay for after school for make-up lessons since he missed. He left me in his spot. Iruka. Sensei never noticed though. Kakashi hummed to himself, trying to remember who the clone was referring to when he said, Iruka. Isn't he a Chunin? Naruto nodded and said, yeah, Shikamaru said he was. A Chunin should be able to realize when a jutsu is cast. Especially the shadow clone jutsu, Naruto, since you haven't mastered it to the point where you don't create the massive white chakra clouds. The Jonin exclaimed. Actually, boss was very smart about it. He knocked over some chalkboard erasers that caused lots of dust and forced Iruka Sensei to start coughing. In the dust cloud, he created me and ran out the door. Is this true, Naruto? Kakashi asked, turning a cool gaze on the shy boy. The blonde boy, ratted out, could only glare angrily at his copy and nod sheepishly. Regarding the irony, he had given himself up. That is quite impressive, Naruto. A pair of deep oceanic eyes widened in shock at the unexpected praise. Don't give me that look. It was very clever of you to think of way around that particular weakness to the jutsu. Though don't think you're getting off that easy, Kakashi went on. The boy with the blonde hair sighed, realizing it was too good to be true. Although his brother was an extremely relaxed person, he was very strict when it came to rules. Yeah, I know. Kakashi made the decision to postpone his punishment until later after noticing his little charge's dejected expression. After all, the child had successfully executed a forbidden jutsu in front of a Chunin and gotten away with it. That ought to be recognized with some sort of honorific. Before you head into the house, how about you follow me? I have something to show you. The question startled Naruto, who silently followed the silver-haired Jonin down a narrow, overgrown path while his clone trotted beside him. The pleasant silence between them served as a barrier as they strolled. As he briefed the group on what they were going to witness, Kakashi broke the silence that had descended upon them. Gaara has made quite the discovery today. With bewildered eyes, Naruto glanced up at the young man wearing a mask. As they strolled along, his abrupt declaration had taken both the creator and the clone by surprise. He has. What is it? I'll let him tell you himself. Don't want to spoil the surprise. He was very excited at the prospect of telling you. The path ended at a break in the tree line as he was finishing his sentence, and a few feet away was a sandy riverbank devoid of any living things. Naruto, wearing a bewildered expression now, glared up at the shinobi who appeared to be amused. Okay. Well, where is he? As he pulled out a red small book with a clear warning on the cover and held it in front of him, Kakashi answered, down by the river. I don't see anyone. Wait, what's that? Naruto said, his scowl growing in response to the older man's actions. He then resumed scanning the riverbank for any indications of a red head hidden behind a black mask. It was a sand-hardened sphere that caught his sudden attention. It lay exactly in the middle of the largest area of sand along the riverbank. Naruto's searing eyes darted across the sand sphere, seeking clues regarding the origin of the peculiar structure. Without realizing it, he moved forward toward the strange ball. That there would be Gaara. He was startled out of his daze by Kakashi's voice. Naruto shook his head, though he wasn't sure if it was in shock or disbelief. Is that Gaara? The young blonde was so engrossed in his shock that he didn't even notice when his replica appeared next to him. The clone squinted at the sphere that stood majestically in front of them, seeing the expression on his creator's face. The other people on the river bank were shocked when the doppelganger unknown currency Inger charged towards the sandy barrier and punched it with tremendous force before either of them could stop him. Nothing moved. Only startled silence, interrupted by the screech of a nearby bird. The other two men's brows were adorned with twin, throbbing ticks of irritation until one of them could take it no more. What the hell is your problem? Naruto angrily exclaimed, able to finally take on the errant clone. A loud punch and a puff of smoke echoed in the afternoon air as the two grappled on the sandy bank. Bewildered and drenched in sand, Naruto stood up, cleaning his face while he directed his wide blue eyes toward the taller man. Why'd you go and do that for? Gray eyebrows furrowed in a melancholy way. You should have dispelled him a while ago, Naruto. How come? Kakashi curtly replied, he had served his purpose. Why keep him around any longer? Perceiving the young blonde's bewilderment persist, he clarified. You created him to take your place at the extra lessons. The lessons are over with now. There was no need for the clone to remain. Naruto visibly stiffened at the mention of the lessons, then let out a dejected cry. Oh no, I have that quiz tomorrow. That stupid clone forgot to tell me what Iruka-sensei taught him. Kakashi watched with impatient patience as the ravenous boy went on. He was aware that if he tried to step in, the raging emotions would focus on him. But minutes went by and the distraught child showed no signs of quieting down. With a sigh, the silver-headed Jonin bent down to give the spiky tangle of blonde hair a pat. Calm down, you knucklehead. We really need to start working on your attention span. Do you not remember what I told you about the shadow clone jutsu when I taught it to you? The mustached child's expression softened into a focused expression as he attempted to remember that night, which hadn't been that long ago. Not really. Naruto dipped his head, trying to project a look of shame, but in reality, he was playing tricks on nobody. Casting aside his mask, Kakashi gave the young academy student a refresher on his recently acquired jutsu while wearing an amused smile. Seated on the ground in front of the Jonin, Naruto paid attention to the man's smooth voice as he spoke. After hearing the explanation through to the end, the blonde grimaced inside, realizing how ridiculous his previous behavior had been. Naruto rubbed his chin and said, so when a clone is dispelled, I learn everything the clone did. Kakashi gave a nod. Yes, though don't be getting any crazy ideas concerning them, okay? With a shrug, the blonde made no promises. To the chagrin of the one-eyed man, he hauled himself up off the sand. Naruto returned his focus to the sand sphere, his eyes resting anxiously on the ball. So what's Gaara doing in there? He found the question amusing for some reason. Kakashi began to giggle with pleasure. Nothing at all. He said he was going to wait in there until you arrived. My guess is that he hasn't realized how dense the sand is and probably can't hear us right now. The blonde realized that his thoughts were humorous and joined in on the laughter. We can't leave him in there, brother. How are we going to get him out? Kakashi considered the situation, going over the options on the list in front of them. 1. He could blast a hole through with his Chidori, but the boy would probably get scared of that. Secondly, they could pound and yell at the apparently unbreakable exterior. The latter option appeared to be the best one prior to needing to take more extreme actions. Fortunately for him, the loudest mouth in Konoha was standing next to him. Why don't you create enough noise to draw his attention and force him to release the jutsu? Naruto enthusiastically nodded and started beating and yelling against the spherical barrier. His specialty was loudness and attention grabbing. A certain red head inside the sphere was perplexed by the unexpected vibrations that reverberated around him. The last straw for his curiosity was the barely audible muffled sounds. The sand barrier gradually gave way, exposing a perplexed boy with raccoon eyes. Naruto? Kakashi? The two in question smiled at the young lad. With great agility, Naruto approached the smaller boy and put his arm around his shoulder. Man, that was some jutsu. You gotta teach me it sometime. Kakashi coughed before the redhead could respond, interrupting the little boy's thought process. Actually, Naruto, I don't think that will be possible. You see, Gaara's from a family of sand users. This means that their chakra is easily able to manipulate the sand or something of the like quite easily. Think of it as a family trait. A bloodline limit of sorts. The silence that greeted his statement was so intense that he could almost hear the crickets. He was initially perplexed by the boy's narrowed expressions. Then it dawned on him. You guys don't know what a bloodline limit is, don't you? Inquired Kakashi in a flat tone. Kakashi's expression lit up with a grimly amused smile as the boys nodded. His first thought was, of course, you don't. And then he sighed, realizing he would be teaching later that day. These were the reasons he was not interested in becoming a Jonin sensei. All he wanted to do was read his adult novel while sitting beneath a lovely tree. It was just such a drag. Alright fellas, I'll explain over dinner, it's getting quite late now. So let's head back. The young boys were led by Kakashi back along the overgrown path. The sun sank lower in the sky as the three of them walked. The happy chatter of a small blonde boy filled the crisp night air that rolled over their faces. His friends grinned the same as they listened to his stories of the day. Just as they had reached the back door of the porch, Naruto exclaimed, "You guys should have seen Kiba's face when that jerk said that dogs were stupid animals. I've never seen him so mad before. When he started fighting the guy, of course I jumped in and helped him. No one disrespects dogs around me." The silver-haired man was startled by his declaration and hesitated for a moment before continuing to open the door for the boys. Though Gaara was far more perceptive than Naruto, she noticed the sudden change in behavior. He declined to comment on it, though. The dining room and kitchen were connected by a large area that was accessible through the porch door. A fire crackling in a stone fireplace kept the large kitchen area warm and bright, and it was only a few feet away from the dining area, which was similarly warmed by the warmth of the flames. Even though fall had just begun, the nights became quite chilly. Before vanishing into the kitchen, Kakashi gave the order, "Why don't you guys go wash up and I'll get started on dinner, and make sure to get out of those dirty clothes." Naruto decided to change in the middle of the spacious hallway, even though he had intended for them to do so in their rooms. There were sand and stray clothes all over the floor. After observing with a morbid curiosity, the redhead followed the blonde's example and started to undress as well. When Kakashi realized that he still hadn't gone grocery shopping and that they only had ramen because Naruto had smuggled some into his pack, he went into the kitchen to begin heating up the packages. He nearly fell on the clothes that were all over the hallway when he reappeared there to change into more comfortable attire before moving along a continuous path of sand that led to the restroom adjacent to the kitchen. His frustration increased as he continued to walk. He had no intention of having kids. He trailed along the sandy area until it came to an end at the restroom. Outside the door, he could hear the naive laughter. As Naruto was inside teaching Gaara how to properly set up a toothpaste bomb, the door behind them suddenly burst open. Naruto and Gaara spun around, prepared for any mischief. Kakashi stomped in, his narrowed eye the only indication of his deeply disapproving expression. "Why did you take off your clothes in the middle of the hallway?" Naruto was momentarily confused by the older man's abrupt arrival, but he soon realized what the questions were about. "Oh, it was such a long way back to our rooms, so we just took them off." Kakashi shot the blonde a menacing look. Upon seeing the man with silver hair, Naruto appeared to become smaller. His voice reverberated throughout the room, "Go clean it up." For a moment, the statement lingered in the air, before the boy with the whiskers furrowed his mouth in disgust. Why should we? With a raised eyebrow, Kakashi said, you made the mess, so you will clean it, in a calm voice. The Jonin's deep blue, oceanic eyes wavered as though they were looking for something. Their mouths opened wide in shock a second later. Suddenly, Naruto expressed some embarrassment at his earlier actions, saying, right, sorry, we'll go do that. Come on, Gaara. After the boys vanished through the door, Kakashi was shocked by how simple it had been to persuade Naruto to act. Normally, he was very difficult to work with and extremely stubborn. What could have caused this shift, I wonder? The Jonin put those thoughts away for later and went back to trying to get to his room. He heard something fall as he was about to go upstairs, and to his surprise, he turned to see the two boys searching through a closet and taking out a dustpan and wooden broom. Kakashi stepped back up the stairs before they could see him, and from the top of the railing, he watched them go back down the hallway. I'm a seasoned parenting professional. Entering his room, the silver-haired young man started to undress, feeling quite arrogant. Removing his black long-sleeve shirt and green forest vest, Kakashi stood naked in his bedroom, the only thing missing from his personal belongings being the picture of Genin that was sitting on his bedside table. A glass sliding door was being observed by an obsidian eye. The battered and weary shinobi suddenly felt the need for some fresh air and ventured out into the night. A gentle gust of wind caressed silver locks as it rushed through the forest. His absence from his mask outside was a unique occasion. The sensation of the wind brushing against his cheeks had slipped from his memory. If being outside without his mask meant he wouldn't have to worry about someone else dropping by on the spur of the moment, he would have moved out of his apartment long ago. He clutched the railing and looked up at the sky. The icy stars gazed back, unblinking, like other celestial observers. It was a stunning evening. The balcony, which he had thought to be very small, turned out to be much longer than he had thought. He noticed that some of the other bedrooms, but only those on the third floor, had wider balconies when he turned to face the sides. Looking down, I saw that the balcony on the second story was not the same as the one on the third. Rather than discontinuing at specific bedrooms, it linked every room on the second floor that opened into it. It was like an outdoor hallway, in a way. It was ideal for ninjas to have rapid access to rooms and to accommodate last-minute departures. His sensei had done his due diligence and built the perfect shinobi home. Simple to stop and challenging to attack. He had not overlooked the fact that the entire estate was surrounded by a barrier. It remained until the house was sealed again. It got stronger every time they were at home, especially with him or Naruto around. Since the boy had not yet been left alone there, he was unsure of how it would respond to Gaara. I'll save that theory for another time. The shinobi was startled out of his reverie by the microwave's harsh beep, signaling that their dinner was done. He dressed in a long-sleeved blue, navy shirt and walked back downstairs to the kitchen. The hallway was now free of sand and clothing, which pleased him. As he entered the kitchen, he was met with an extremely amusing sight. The always vivacious Naruto was balancing on a chair, with Gaara supporting his legs. With his tongue protruding from his mouth, the youthful blonde labored to grasp the beeping device. A look of determination lit up the boy's face. It seems he really wanted that ramen. Naruto grumbled as he ascended the chair, I'm going to have to push you up, Gaara. I can't reach. Reluctant to put the two in danger, Kakashi walked over and picked up the steaming noodles in the cups. He rebuked them, saying, it's dangerous to do something like that, boys. You could get hurt. And led them to the dining room. He picked up some chopsticks and set the cups in front of the two seated people. As he was about to put the food in his mouth, he took a bite out of his own and saw that his dinner companions were not moving. He lowered the chopsticks and gave the wide-eyed boys a sharp look. Kakashi raised an eyebrow and asked, something wrong? Naruto quickly shook his head and turned his stunned eyes back to his favorite dish. But the redhead made the decision to inquire as to what had been going through both of their minds. The other two were taken aback by his abrupt response, you are not wearing your mask. Kakashi cocked his head, sporting a noticeable smirk, and said, no, I'm not. I shouldn't have to wear my mask in my own home now, do I? Given his elder brother, Naruto concluded that this was probably his best chance to answer the question that had been bothering him for a long time. So why do you wear the mask? He asked, his mouth full of noodles. Kakashi chewed his own pasta slowly, considering how to respond to the query. He was relieved that he had managed to keep his headband covering his eye. Well, I think it looks cool, don't you? It was the first time either of the boys had ever seen him smile. They gave it back with smiles on their faces. When Kakashi smiled, it looked really good. Yes, it does, Naruto said with joy. Gaara gave a nod of agreement. The boy with the golden hair slurped something, and then there was a soothing silence. Kakashi eventually assumed a contemplative stance and sat down. He had the impression that he was missing something, but what exactly was it? Then it dawned on him. "Say boys, what did you do with all that sand?" Now Naruto responded. "Gaara has it. You have it?" he asked, casting a questioning glance in the redhead's direction. Gaara nodded and brought out the dustpan he had seen them take earlier. Kakashi laughed and said, "You know, you could have just thrown it outside." The shinobi was surprised when the boys shook their heads. Observing the perplexed expression on the Jonin's face once more, Gaara explained. "We did, but it keeps coming back." "Keeps coming back?" asked the man with silver hair. Gaara decided it would be best to show him by giving Naruto the dustpan and starting to move away from them. The spectators watched in awe as the sand emerged from the pan and followed the boy back. Kakashi was fascinated by the way the sand followed the movements of the redheads and thought, "Well, look at that. I see what you mean now." Naruto assisted the younger boy in returning the sand to the dustpan and said, "The only way we could get it to stop was putting it on the dustpan and for Gaara to keep it close to him." The shinobi considered a few theories. Is one Tails responsible for this? The redhead was reassured by Kakashi as he went back to his seat at the table. "My guess it has to do with your chakra, Gaara, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. The guy who's going to come and help you with your little problem. He can also help us figure out why the sand does that." Another issue. Free dinner was had. The youngest of the three abruptly stopped moving and the three of them found themselves climbing stairs. Naruto asked, "Something wrong, Gaara?" as he turned to face him. The redhead gave a small shake of his head and said, "No, I almost forgot. There was something I wanted to show you today." "Wasn't that jutsu what you wanted to show me?" Naruto asked, tilting his head and putting a finger to his chin. He received another shake of red hair in response, but Gaara did not go into detail this time. Rather, he made his way to the more profound section of a hallway that the other two had not ventured into since their arrival, the left side. For the Jonin, this was a novel development. He, too, had thought the young boy had been referring to the Sanjutsu. The small red-headed child was followed silently by two inquisitive males. The Suna boy halted at a pair of doors before the blonde could say what was on his mind. Except for the entrance, every room in the rest of the house had a single door. Something significant was concealed behind those doors. Gaara carefully pushed open the wooden doors. The male with blonde and silver hair was stunned by what he saw when he stepped over the threshold. There, unspoiled by the outside world, is a scene of such beauty. It was a large room. Warm, earthy colors covered the walls, making it the ideal place to fall asleep. It was comforting. The left side of the room was strewn with large stationary windows that let in an abundance of natural light and a view of the outdoors. The portion that was exposed to the nearby forest. The trees created feathery shadows on the ground and obscured the sky. Nevertheless, the room was still able to be lit in a silvery hue by the moonlight. The master bedroom was the location. There was a large bed in the middle that would be perfect for a married couple. Still, the crib that lay a few feet from the windows was what made the blonde's ocean. Blue eyes well up with tears. So skillfully made. The boy with the short mustache moved painfully slowly toward it. Every step seemed to be made of lead. Unwanted memories of himself as a baby, rocking gently to sleep in the moonlight while a man with hair similar to his own stood above him and whispered sweet nothings to him. The image was of him as a little child, falling asleep under the moonlight. At last, he arrived at the cradle that ought to have served as his bed during his early years. He was now in front of it, far too large to fit inside without running the risk of shattering it. It had never been touched, it had never rocked a baby to sleep, and maybe it never will. A pale hand tightly grasped the wooden railing, causing his knuckles to turn white. How come missing something he never had hurt so much? He asked, his voice just above a whisper. Why? It seemed to the other two occupants that they were prying into a moment that was intended for no eyes. However, Kakashi was aware of the unstated query. Inhaling deeply, the youthful shinobi prepared himself. Now was the moment for him to fulfill his pledge to his sensei. As he got closer to the quivering boy, everything in him begged him to turn around. It was time for him to face his feelings. The secret to ultimately defeating all those torrential, evil emotions he had hidden deep inside was none other than his sensei's sona, that great man's own flesh and blood. It was time to confront his inner demons. They died so we could live. Someone very wise once told me that we should be grateful for the sacrifices others make for us. We should live happy because they wouldn't want us to be sad. Instead, we should smile because that would be what they would want. Do you remember who said that? Kakashi repeated phrases that were old. He said them as though they were true. Well, it was high time he did. He sensed the blonde tensing up next to him, he recalled. Abruptly, two trembling small arms encircled his chest. Coughed sobs filled the spacious bedroom. As best he could, Kakashi tried to calm the boy. Gaara felt a great deal of guilt as he watched everything fall apart in front of him. He was unaware that this would have such an impact on his brother, his savior. The boy who had taught him the true meaning of strength was reduced to a whining child, and it hurt him. He saw the bookshelf that had drawn his attention earlier in the day as he turned to leave the room. It dawned on him that there was something else he wanted Naruto to see. The boy with the whiskers was distracted from his suffering by a light tap on his shoulder. Naruto noticed a tan-colored book being held in front of him as he turned around from his position inside Kakashi's chest. He sniffed and picked up the book in his trembling hands. A story of the totally brave shinobi. With his voice rasping from his cries, Naruto asked, "What's this for Gaara?" Both academy students and seasoned shinobi were shocked by his quiet reply, "I read it. You need to read it, it belonged to your father." Kakashi glanced at the title and gave a small smile. Gaara had plenty to surprise us. "This book is where Sensei got your name from, Naruto." The blonde turned her wide, disbelieving eyes up at the silver-haired man at the statement. All it took for the blonde to clench the book to his chest was a soft reply, "The main character is named Naruto, just like you." His hands clenched around it as though he was worried it would vanish out of thin air. Kakashi spoke, seeing that the blonde was finally still enough to listen to him. "Your parents loved you very much, Naruto, never forget that. Remember that promise I made you the day we meet?" There was only one promise he could recall from that day. "You said that we would restore a clan that had died and make it feared again." With a warm smile, Kakashi nodded. "That's right. The Namikaze name will be great and feared by all nations once again. Together we'll make your parents proud. How does that sound?" With tears welling up around the corners of his azure eyes, Naruto could only bow his head in surrender. With this man, where would he be? Speaking to the redhead that was silent, a warm, dark eye asked, "What do you say, Gaara? Want to join this family of two?" Gaara stood frozen in place, shocked. It was not a question he had ever expected to be asked of him. His cobalt blue, tear-stained eyes briefly changed from teal to teal. He saw that sincere, kind gaze return to him. After taking one last sniff, Naruto walked up to the stunned boy. Placing his incomparable signature smile back where it belonged, the blonde put a hand on the smaller boy's shoulders and took hold of his new, priceless treasure in the other. His kind offer made the redhead smile. "Yeah, what do you say, Gaara? Want to be a Namikaze? We got lots of room." Nothing was strong enough to restrain his brother? To the delight of his new brothers, Gaara simply nodded, unable to think of a suitable reply. Though it was difficult at first, they will eventually get the hang of things. That evening, the three of them left the room in high spirits. With one resounding thought, everyone fell asleep, and the future appeared bright. "I am not alone anymore. It has been 2 weeks since Gaara moved into Konoha. It took us 2 weeks to try and figure out how things were going to work after that." The Namikaze family clearly never experienced a dull moment. On the day that man arrived, this was particularly true. It all began one sunny autumn afternoon. The Hokage had summoned Kakashi to the tower. The silver-haired man gave Naruto instructions to watch Gaara and stay out of trouble, then started getting ready for his departure after experiencing a brief panic attack at the thought of having to return the priceless red-covered book. To the pug's dismay, he did, however, leave his faithful companion Pakun to keep an eye on the two as a precaution. "If it's a mission, I'll have to summon the rest of the pack to keep a watch over you guys when I return," Kakashi quickly clarified. He was answered with a loud whine from the ever-jolly blonde. "We don't need babysitters, right, Gar?" He turned to face the redhead, who was sitting there quietly eating some cereal as support, and got a simple, heartless shrug in return. "What a waste of backup." The blonde quickly responded, "That's a yes." Kakashi laughed and ruffled Naruto's spiky hair before making his way to the door. "I'll be back as soon as I'm done. Don't leave the estate grounds, all right?" The boys nodded together, and the Jonin bounded out of the palatial estate and toward the Hokage tower. The journey was brief, and Kakashi entered without using the door in the same manner as a certain white-haired man had about an hour earlier. It was quite a surprise to find a foreign man waiting for him in the office, but it was one that was much anticipated and welcomed. Kakashi, crouching on the windowsill, said, Master Jiraiya, it's nice to see you again. Likewise, Kakashi. The imposing white-haired man grunted in return, then grinned mischievously. I hear you've caused quite the commotion in Suna. Kakashi gave the man an eye smile while scratching his head sheepishly. Yes, well, Sensei's son is mostly to blame for that. The older man let out a deep sigh and gave the young shinobi a solemn nod. How is the kid? To the shocked surprise of the other two men, Kakashi responded with a hint of fondness. He's doing all right. There's a whole lot of his mother in him, but he's definitely his father's son. So I hear, Jiraiya muttered softly before raising her voice to ask to be told about the other boy, the son of the cage. Pulling a gloved hand with no fingers through his hair that defies gravity, Kakashi started to explain the situation to the Sannin. So that's about it. Do you think you can fix his seal? The Toad Sage answered the shinobi with a cool demeanor after being silent for a while, lost in contemplation. Yes, I believe so. Though I do wish Minato was here for this. He'd be the best bet of pulling this type of thing off. However, I'll try my best to see what I can do for the boy. Kakashi answered, bending his head slightly. That's all we can ask of you. The Sandaime had been eerily silent since Kakashi arrived, watching the two shinobis' interaction with a cold, analytical gaze. When will you be able to do the sealing, Jiraiya? Asked the Hokage, speaking for the first time since the silver-haired Jonin first appeared. The wise man humming to himself looked thoughtfully for a moment before answering, by the end of today should work. However, we'll need a place that is pretty isolated from the village, since I'm not quite sure what will happen once we start. As he descended from the window to extend his long legs before assuming his slouching position, Kakashi said, the estate should work. It's far enough from anyone to bring any attention to it. A bewildered expression traversed the fair-haired Sannin. Glancing at him, Kakashi explained, Sensei's estate. To the amazement of the Hokage and the Jonin, however, the Sannin continued to receive the glance. Sarutobi then queries, did you not know about the estate Minato had built? As a result, Jiraiya answered, shaking his head, no, not at all. The kid never told me anything about it. With a confused glance exchanged between them, Kakashi broke the silence. He never told me about it either. Maybe he meant to surprise you as well. The older shinobi appeared to be lost in thought, narrowing his eyes, then he answered, maybe. But who knows what Minato was thinking? He was always a mystery. Kakashi nodded and silently agreed. He was well aware of the sensei's enigmatic nature. The broad man approached the open window just as the Sharingan holder was about to speak, saying, I'll send word for you later when I have everything prepared for the sealing. I have some things to do. The other man dismissed the Jonin and Hokage with such speed that they were left somewhat confused, even after the white-haired Sannin had vanished from sight. As he made his way toward the window, Kakashi asked out loud, is he always like this? Unfortunately, yes, the fearsome Hokage muttered while he blasted a ring of smoke and observed it ascend to the ceiling. However, he is the only one capable of having any sort of chance of fixing that seal. The only one I trust. That last assertion was agreed upon by both men. They could not take such a complicated seal lightly, or else they would have a dead child on their hands and a rampaging, tail-bearing beast terrorizing their home once more. As soon as Kakashi stood back up on the windowsill, the older man's dark eyes narrowed sharply. One moment, Kakashi, there is one other matter that we must discuss. The young man waited patiently for his superior to continue, as indifferent as ever. The man smoking blinked at Kakashi, gesturing for her to lower her head and close the window. He stood before the third Hokage, hands in his pockets, looking interested now. I have come to the conclusion that it will be inevitable that the truth about Gaara will come to light. That is why I have prepared a contingency plan for when the time comes. I must ask you now, what are you willing to do for this village? His forehead covered in a headband had deeper wrinkles where his silver eyebrows met in a creased line. What was he prepared to give up? The tall, young shinobi was behind the door when it closed firmly. A wicked smile stretched across a face stubbled with whiskers. The time to play was when the adults were gone. Naruto ran up the stairs and yelled, hey, Gar. Finish up, man. We don't got much time before he comes back. The little redhead cocked his head, confused. Gazing up the wooden steps, he watched the blonde with his metal spoon hanging in his mouth. Time for what? Naruto reappeared before he could question the older boy, grabbing him by the arm and pulling him toward the back door that opened into a patio with a view of the little training field Kakashi had constructed for them to use. The pug, who was their babysitter, let out a soft sigh and started running after them, but Naruto had forgotten about him in his hurry. Their destination appeared to be a dilapidated wooden post. After his arm was released, Gaara said, "Why are we out here?" Kakashi said to stay in the house. Nope, he said not to leave the estate grounds. We're in the backyard, so technically we're still on estate grounds. Naruto laughed. Satisfied with his response, Gaara bided her time for the excessively vivacious blonde to elaborate. As to why we're out here, you're gonna help me practice. The young redhead, even more perplexed now, watched as Naruto started to make multiple clones. 8 clones were arranged side by side, waiting for their creator to give them commands. A pug appeared and leapt to the top of the wooden post. A deep voice asked, "Didn't Kakashi say not to overdo it with those clones of yours, pup?" To the amusement of the small dog, the young blonde quickly refuted, saying, "Pakun, he said not to make more than 10. I made 8. The pug curled up on his spot above the training post and said, "Yeah, whatever, I'm going to take a nap. So don't kill yourself or else I won't let you touch my paw ever again." Muttering under his breath, Naruto cast a sinister look at the Ninken. Gaara had come to understand the meaning of that particular look. There was going to be a major upset. From his position on the line, one of the clones impatiently said, "Hey, boss. We gonna start yet or what?" Naruto redirected his focus to his initial goal and proceeded to give commands to his followers. After the clones had paired off, he said, "Okay, guys, this is what we're going to do. First, I want all of you to pair up. Next, I want half of you guys to start on my homework, and then to read whatever books you can find on ceiling." Preoccupied with the blonde's directions now, Gaara asked, "Naruto, why ceiling?" Anticipating the inquiry, Naruto quickly responded, "Well, since my dad was a master of the sealing arts, I want to be too. I asked Kakashi about it the other day and he told me that sealing can take years to learn. So I decided I was going to start early. So by the time I graduate from the academy, I'll know enough sealing jutsus that I'll be super powerful and awesome. What do y'all think?" To the 7-year-old's delight, Gaara nodded in agreement as he saw the eager, cheery smile on his brother's face. It sounded like a sensible plan. How could something go wrong? "May I learn too?" Naruto rubbed his chin, feigning thoughtfulness as he considered the question. However, the redhead had also started to pick up on the blonde's humor, and when he was being serious, seldom did there seem to be serious moments. With a cheeky grin, the cheeky blonde said, "Well, of course you can. We'll learn together. Besides, how hard will it be?" Before focusing on his 4 remaining clones. "The rest of you guys, I want to start practicing this chakra control thing Garuka Sensei made me, Shikamaru, Choji, and Kiba do yesterday after we got caught skipping. You know, the one with the leaf on our foreheads." 4 heads nodded simultaneously, sly smiles on their faces. How much fun that day had been. Gaara became very curious to find out too, after witnessing the clones sit down and attempt, with varying degrees of failure, to stick the green leaves on their tan brows. Grabbing his own leaf, he tried to do the same movements as the blondes. The task seemed easier than it actually was. One of the clones nearby saw what the small redhead was doing and said, "You have to use chakra to make the leaf stick." Teal's eyes narrowed in silent annoyance and frustration at not being able to get the leaf to stay where he had put it for once. A second clone replied, "It's kinda hard at first, but you just gotta practice. Kakashi's been having me do these kind of things for a while now, so it isn't as hard as it was at first. Try concentrating on your forehead, not the leaf." The boy with the raccoon eyes huffed a little and went back to work. But as time passed, he became increasingly conscious of how quiet their little training area had become. The calm atmosphere here made him think of how lonely he had been back in Suna, where he had once loved it. In his new house, there was seldom any quiet. Gaara said, "Naruto, may I ask you something?" after failing to get the damned leaf to stick once more. The original blonde, managing not to lose focus, nodded and peered at the small red head with big curious eyes. "Why are we not liked?" Naruto cocked his head, looking puzzled, unaware that the leaf was still subtly resting on his forehead. "What do you mean?" "Recall how the villagers had behaved around you when we first arrived in Konoha," Gaara said, letting out a gentle sigh. The blonde nodded slowly, remaining silent until the other boy finished explaining what he was thinking. The sudden chatter also sat curiously among the clones. The young Suna boy, his past attempts completely forgotten, felt as though his heart ached. "They called you monster. Back in Suna, the villagers of my old home called me that too. Why? It was the question he'd asked himself several times, but he'd never found the answer. At the question, Pakun, who had looked like he was sleeping, twitched his ears. There was a need to end this particular conversation. Naruto was not given a chance to consider the question before Pakun, having just hopped down from his spot on top of the post, barked, "Hey pups, don't you think it's time for lunch? You've been out here for 5 hours." As the pug got closer to them, Naruto scowled a little. Over the years, he had become aware of when someone was attempting to steer the conversation, if there was one thing. When it did, it usually didn't portend well for him. Gaara and Naruto exchanged a glance, then both rose up from the grass as the clones vanished. With his hands behind his head, Naruto considered the question as he walked back towards the estate. He recalled how the people in Suna had treated Gaara, and how that had ignited their friendship. He had discovered an individual who resembled him or who comprehended how the civilians treated him. "Gaara, I don't really know why they treat us like that, but we're not monsters. Those people are just stupid. We're the sons of cages. One day we'll be so powerful that they'll have to respect us," Naruto boldly stated, bringing a halt to his. Pakun snorted softly at the declaration, grinning. "This puppy is unique." Gaara could only nod at the stern. Looking blonde, his teal eyes widening slightly with surprise. There was fierce, unwavering determination behind those bright, ocean-colored eyes. Naruto grinned and gave Gaara a head pat, the way Kakashi used to do to him. After that, he started walking back towards the porch door, leaving a puzzled, looking redhead and a chuckled pug in their wake. Observing the small boy's puzzled expression, Pakun rubbed his head against the closed hand. Before strolling after the blonde, the pug wisely said, "Don't worry so much about those kinds of things. The pup is right, you know. Neither of you are monsters. You just have to prove those other people wrong." Gaara tentatively reached up for his head with the hand the dog had not touched. He held up the other hand, looked at it, then clenched it firmly. He looked up at the two who were arguing happily in front of him. The boy, who was pallid, smiled. Naruto turned to look behind him and saw his younger brother motionless. "Yo, Gar, hurry up will ya? I'm starving." The redhead grinned and jogged after them, needing no more prodding. Is Naruto a monster? Thus, I'm not either. The two were happily gorging on the always present ramen when he got there. It's imperative that I start encouraging them to try new foods. For their age, they're incredibly small. Kakashi entered the cozy dining room and thought to himself. It was early September, but already the air was sharply cold. Every day gets progressively colder. Heat of any kind was much appreciated. After removing his Jonin vest, Kakashi sat down and put his bulky clothes on the back of his chair. Naruto asked, his mouth full of noodles, "Hey brother, what the old man want?" "Oh, the usual, complaining about how a certain someone always messes with his shinobi. You're lucky I'm so popular or else he'd have you locked up for putting itching powder in the Anbu vests," Kakashi said, having grown accustomed to the blonde's habits. Naruto flashed a wide smile, unabashedly proud of his successes in pulling practical jokes. His favorite thing to do was always trick the Anbu. "Hey, you gotta admit that's funny." The man with silver hair grinned and nodded yes. Observing the so-called cold killers angrily scratching themselves was highly entertaining. He was relieved to be free of membership. On another note, that man I told you about boys has arrived. He'll be here later tonight. The words seemed to linger in the air for a moment before the sound of metal cutlery striking the wooden table surface filled the space. He responded to the boy's questioning looks with, "He'll be able to help Gaara." The blonde's face lit up with a big smile at the reply. "That's great, Gar, you'll be able to get some sleep now," Naruto exclaimed, encircling the startled redhead with his arms. On the other hand, Kakashi was more aware of the boy's silence. "Say Naruto, would you like to go to Ichiraku's and pick us up some bowls to celebrate? I'm sure you boys are still hungry regardless that you just ate." With a quick nod, the blonde accepted the money and bolted out the door. The sound of a door closing was audible throughout the house, and Kakashi turned a cool gaze on the silent boy. His eyes were glazed over, as he noticed. He was deep in contemplation. With a smooth, soft voice, Kakashi said, "There's nothing to fear. He's a man I trust to be able to help you with your problem." Gaara said, "It's not that. It's just, what's wrong with me?" After an unsettling pause in which the boy did not initially show that he had heard him. Startled, Kakashi forced his expression to hide his true feelings. It was second nature to him as a Jonin. With a cool, collected gaze, his dark eye was fixed on the boy. "Well, we won't know until he arrives. There is no use to worry about something until then. I assure you that nothing bad will happen to you. Gaara accepted his word with a nod, then made an effort to put his worries aside. There was no need for Kakashi to start lying to him now, since he had never done so before. Kakashi rambled as he made his way to his room. Well, that knucklehead of ours is probably going to be a while. I'm going to go take a shower. I've had quite the day. Sitting at the dining room table by myself now. Gaara got up too and entered the den. His favorite room on the estate since he moved in. There were books everywhere, covering a wide range of topics. Gaara was an avid reader, as Naruto had once described her. Reading in the den, he passed most of the day. Gaara pulled open the book he was reading and took his favorite spot by the roaring fireplace. It discussed the fundamentals of sealing. Despite his best efforts, his blonde brother was not cut out for a life of reading. It was the small red-headed boy's idea to read the books and, ideally, impart his knowledge to the older boy. For his part, Naruto had been fine with the arrangement once they had entered and discovered that his clones had not only finished his homework but had also dozed off while reading the books. They resembled their creator in every way. After an agonizingly long hour of waiting, Naruto had managed to get the bowls of piping hot ramen that Kakashi had requested. The blonde menace walked away from the long-standing ramen stand, waving to the cook, "Thanks old man, I'll see y'all later." Naruto didn't mind that it was a long walk from the estate to the stand. It was worth it to eat ramen. The bitter sting of fall stirred the air with a slight breeze. Naruto shivered a little and moaned, "Man, I wish I had grabbed my jacket." The blonde quickened his pace, being cautious not to spill the priceless cargo, wanting to avoid being out on the chilly streets for any longer. He had decided to bypass the public baths and hot springs in favor of a quicker route when he heard an odd noise. Naturally curious, he followed the strange giggles to a man squatting on a tree branch and watching the women's restroom. For the moment forgetting his ramen, Naruto walked up to the odd man. His attention was drawn to his red facial markings and long white hair. The blonde said, "Hey, old man, what are you doing up there?" A little too loudly, his voice called out to the gullible women taking a bath, drawing them in. The man was startled from his perch by screams and anguished utterances. With a painful thud, the man fell heavily to the ground after an expertly thrown rock had struck him in the head. Naruto approached the quivering man in bed and proceeded to jab him with a stick he had picked up. "Hey, you alright, mister? You're not dead, are you?" His naive inquiries were laced with angry expletives. "Lousy brat, why'd you go and do that for?" "Do what?" The man yelled angrily, "Give me away." The blonde, scratching his cheek in bewilderment, tilted his head to the side, amazed at the enraged profanities that kept coming out of the older man's mouth. This man was strange. The man started to gather his belongings that had fallen beside him and muttered under his breath, "And to think it almost got to the good part." The elder turned to leave and got a good look at the little nuisance that had destroyed his research just as he was about to turn around. Blonde hair. Those eyes. It is not possible. "Say you're not Naruto by any chance, are you?" Jiraiya inquired, towering over the young academy boy. Naruto scowled and gave the man a suspicious look before nodding gradually. He was crawling back towards safety and hardly noticed the man's eyes widening slightly. "Hey, where are you going?" Jiraiya asked, trailing behind the blonde as she turned to retreat. Naruto screamed over his shoulder, "None of your business, creep," as he made a quick escape while maintaining a tight grip on the cargo. Once he broke through the tree line, the whiskered prankster ran, not bothering to look behind him, until the well-known path to the estate appeared. He never once heard someone pursuing him with their feet. As soon as he arrived at the double wooden doors, he let out a relieved breath. Thankfully, Kakashi had shown him how to open it on his own. The blonde turned to face the intruder as his hand barely touched the silver plate due to a sudden gasp from behind him. The eerie man with white hair from the bathhouses was standing there, looking amazed. I believed that I had lost him. Feeling a little afraid now, Naruto sent a quick burst of chakra to the plate and rushed into the estate, slamming the doors behind him. His sudden appearance warned the other two residents of the spacious house. One pair of feet approached him from above, while the other came from the side. Naruto leapt to the ground, dropping the boxed ramen, and cried out, "Kakashi! There's a really creepy dude outside. He followed me here from the hot springs. What do we do?" As he ran towards the heavier set of footsteps. A silver mop of wet hair emerged from the top of the staircase, capturing the startled blonde in his arms just in time. Kakashi attempted to calm down the fussy boy by saying, "Whoa there Naruto, calm down. What man?" Naruto pointed to the front door and hissed, "Outside." He's out there. Kakashi narrowed his eyes in response to the pointed finger, putting his mask back in place, and then stepped outside. The Jonin had just closed the door when Gaara arrived. The redhead turned around and faced the wide-eyed boy, his eyes confusedly looking up at the startled-looking blonde. Naruto, what's going on? I was coming back from Ichiraku's when I saw this guy up on a tree over the hot springs. I called him and he fell off. After that he started asking me who I was, so I ran. He followed me here. He's super creepy Gaara, Naruto said with a long breath. The redhead, barely able to comprehend the entire explanation, did nothing more than nod as he too began to walk toward the door, only to be dragged back by the startled blonde. No, Gaara. Don't go out there, we have to wait until Kakashi comes back. The creep is still out there. In the meantime, across the door, the current state of affairs amused the two men greatly. Kakashi had expected the worst when he'd first stepped outside. Still, the Toad Sage was the one who welcomed him. Master Jiraiya? With the same effortless grace as the man with silver hair, the man called back, Kakashi. The Jonin, a little perplexed, waited for the Sannin to clarify. Jiraiya flicked a piece of lint off his shoulder and moaned, yeah, I followed the little brat here. Kakashi hummed and nodded, then inquired, where did you meet him? A cunning smile told the shinobi everything he needed to know. Ah, you were researching again, weren't you? Was there ever any doubt? Kakashi groaned softly and a disapproving expression crossed his face. I'm not complaining about that, but Gaara's seal is of a bit more importance, don't you think? Jiraiya, sensing the direction the Jonin was taking, took a scroll from his inner coat and gave it to the frustrated young man. I have what should work. It isn't to the level of Naruto's, but it should allow the boy more freedom from the beast's influence. Glancing over the intricate seals written in conjugation on the scroll, Kakashi realized this was going to require more study than he had. Perhaps back then, I ought to have given Sensei more attention. Can you do it now? Kakashi waited for the elder's response, their steely gazes locked. Jiraiya gave a firm nod, then moved to get closer to the entrance. The shining platinum plate captured his attention right away. He tentatively reached for the engraved name, softly murmuring, this really is Minato's estate, isn't it? Yes, it's beautiful as not. Unbelievable so. A pair of inquisitive eyes watched the strange interaction with caution as the two men were engrossed in their memories of the past. Naruto whispered to his companion, PSSH. Gar, he said my dad's name. Do you think he knows him? As they attempted to listen in on the conversation occurring outside the door they had managed to pry open. Your dad was the fourth Hokage. Everyone in your village knew him. Oh yeah. Though, Kakashi seems to know him too. He might be an old friend of his, Gaara hurriedly added, catching the blonde's faint hint of disappointment in her voice. Nodding, Naruto puffed out his chest and, mustering all his bravery, walked out into the men's presence, Gaara trailing behind. Naruto asked, a little indignant, hey, creepy old man, why'd you follow me? The white-haired boulder of a man scowled down at the blonde, annoyed. The only caution Jiraiya offered before giving the blonde's hard head a very gentle fist smack was, oh, it's you. Naruto yowled, clenching his head from the throbbing pain. He saw the smug expression on the elder's face, and his pain slowly turned to righteous anger. I'll kick your ass, old man. He was about to attack when Kakashi grabbed him by the collar. Kakashi tried to stop the boy from attacking by holding him in midair. Naruto, this man is the one we've been expecting. The one who will help Gaara. Owl. Like blue eyes blink with incredulous confusion, not in a way. You're kidding, right? This old perv? The cold stare the Jonin was giving him silenced the outraged shout Jiraiya was about to let out. Returning his focus to the blonde, Kakashi continued, he is one of the legendary Sannin, Jiraiya the Toad Sage. The other three men noticed a tiny gasp coming from behind Kakashi's long legs. Gar? Naruto inquired, observing the small redhead's expression of amazement. He is the Jiraiya? Gaara asked again, looking up at the tall man who seemed a little smug about the boy's response to him. Incredulous, Naruto prodded, you know who he is. As he moved closer to the man, Gaara answered, he is the teacher of the fourth Hokage. He taught your father Naruto. One of the last seal masters. You're also supposed to be one of the strongest ninja in the whole world. Jiraiya began a rather ridiculous introduction, puffing out his chest with conceited pride. But when it became clear that it would take a while, Kakashi cut the oddly posing man off. Yes, well Jiraiya, I think it's best we got this started. Jiraiya pouted and sighed in disappointment, then followed the silver-headed Jonin out of the estate, the two boys in tow. After ensuring he was sufficiently far from their residence, Kakashi came to a halt and bided his time until the Sannin gave them instructions. Is this far enough? Jiraiya looked around him, rummaging through his pack, nodding absently. He produced 2 brushes and a bottle of black liquid. Jiraiya started to explain, passing one to Kakashi. I'll need you to help me write the trigrams in your blood while I use the ink to map out the layout. The Jonin looked at the brush in his hand, as if it were going to hit him, and was horrified. My blood? What for? You're the boy's guardian now. That means you'll be the one that will be constantly near him. This seal will need a chakra source from outside the boy to help override the jutsu that was placed on him. It will also help with another little thing I have in mind, but I'll explain that when we get there. The Sannin clarified before focusing on the tiny red head at issue. Now, I'll need you to take off your clothes. Naruto was taken aback by the request and gaped like a fish out of water. Even more shocking to him was the fact that Gaara and Kakashi seemed unconcerned about it. Hey, wait a minute. You can't just ask someone to take their clothes off, you perv. Putting a soft hand on the blonde's tense shoulder, Kakashi laughed and said, Naruto, don't worry. The seal's master Jiraiya is going to use need to be written on Gaara's skin. Subdued at Kakashi's side, Naruto nodded solemnly, still wary but trusting in his brother. The silver-headed shinobi sighed at the blonde's actions, pricking his finger with his teeth and dousing the brush in his life force. The boy had stripped down to his boxers, and Jiraiya had already started the first layout on Gaara's pale body. He had laughed a little at the fact that the boy was writing strange symbols all over his body without even flinching or complaining. Kakashi, you need to trace the seals exactly as I have them. One mistake and it will not work. The young Jonin nodded, and his blood effectively erased the black ink. Not a single error. Kakashi asked the white-haired Sannin, what's next? Jiraiya took a step back and grinned at their creation. The seal bore a striking resemblance to the intricate design his student had created for his own son, featuring red letters and characters. But in order for the design to function as they had intended, he had to make a few adjustments. Instead of attempting to seal a brand new beast, they were attempting to reroute the boy's internal beast's chakra. Now, I want you to channel your chakra into the seal's center. It will use your chakra as a fail-safe, but will ultimately use the other chakra in the boy to fuel it, Jiraiya clarified. After realizing the carefully concealed meaning in the Sannin's instruction, Kakashi approached the boy. He laid his hand over the boy's bare stomach, the spot where the seal had lain for all of his existence. Gaara, everything will be okay now. Do you trust me? The sudden question causes his teal eyes to widen with surprise. His eyes strayed to the sullen blonde who had watched the entire ordeal warily, not sure how to take it all in. Seeing through the redhead's hesitation, Kakashi grinned slyly. Would it be alright if Naruto added his own chakra to the fail-safe? He asked, turning back to face the Sannin. His request caused the other men to freeze in silence, and Jiraiya gave it some serious thought. Well, more chakra would be best, but does the boy have enough control to not overdo it? The blonde raised a dubious eyebrow and both men turned to face her. What course I can do this? Piece of cake. Jiraiya and Kakashi exchanged a look and sighed together. In a slight defiance, Kakashi said to the Sannin, he has a fairly good handle over his abnormally large chakra capacity. Jiraiya nodded in agreement and told the blonde boy what he needed to do, not really objecting to the boy's chakra inclusion. Naruto listened to the white-haired man and said, so all I have to do is give Gaara some of my chakra? Yes, that's pretty much all you have to do. Alright, I can definitely handle this, exclaimed the blonde with excitement as he leapt to join Gaara. Kakashi questioned as they prepared their hands above the seal, are you ready, Naruto? Naruto looked at the task at hand and nodded. He wasn't going to fail his younger brother. The Jonin silently gave the order after noticing the resolve in those well-known blue eyes, and the two light-haired men began to pump chakra into the seal that was stained crimson. Things did not happen at first, but all of a sudden the seals that had lain dormant began to glow brightly with life. The donors of chakras had to pull back their hands due to the intense heat emanating from it. Holding his hand to his chest, Kakashi inquired, Jiraiya, was that enough? It burned unlike anything else. Yes, now all we have to do is wait for the seal to finish doing its job. Said to be easier than done. Naruto was so scared of the screams that were forced out of Gaara's body that Kakashi had to stop him from running to the boy's side. The boy was in so much pain that his body had been forced to the ground, where it was convulsing violently. The boy was screaming and in such pain that it was nearly enough to bring the Jonin to his knees. They were not only risking breaking whatever seal the young 5-year-old had on him before the new seal could fully serve its purpose, but they had also just subjected him to a full chakra change. Something that both shinobi knew full well. But all of that ended suddenly. Kakashi had led them to a small clearing, and there was a stunned silence. Gaara's body lay mute on the grass. Covered ground, battered and dirty. Not a single movement, not a sound. They were prepared for the worst. Naruto broke free from the Jonin's hold by taking advantage of a sudden lapse in their grasp. He dashed in the direction of the red head. Gaara. Before Jiraiya stopped him in his tracks, Kakashi had emerged from his stunned state and was following the blonde after the anguish-filled shout. "Don't freak out. The kid's fine. The ceiling just knocked him out for a little bit. He'll be up soon." The silver-headed Jonin glanced at the distraught blonde, briefly appeased, then resumed his previous movement. Kakashi tried to calm down the child with the whiskers, saying, "Naruto, don't shake him. He'll wake soon." What happened to him? What were those seals, brother? Anticipating the query, Kakashi started his elaborately contrived falsehood. There was a jutsu placed on him by his father. It made him lose control of his chakra and as a result he was not allowed to sleep. This seal is to help fix that and allow Gaara to have better control of his chakra. He'll finally be able to rest at night too without having to worry. With a scowl, Naruto asked, why would his father do that to him? Didn't he know Gaara would be in pain because of it? What kind of father is that? For both of those grown men, those questions were far too personal. That Naruto would pose a question that also applied to him seemed almost morbidly ironic. For the first time, Kakashi was left speechless by being shaken. How could someone respond to such a question? Jiraiya burst out, saying, "People do dumb things because they're greedy." Greedy? What does that have to do with this? Naruto shot back, turning those piercing blue orbs towards the white-haired man. It's rather simple really. The Kazekage, Gaara's father, was a very ambitious man. He wanted a powerful being under his control. Who better to use than his own son? Yet, he didn't expect such consequences. Jiraiya went on. Naruto scowled, not quite understanding what the Sannin was talking about. Kakashi recognized his misunderstanding and replied, "You see, what Master Jiraiya is saying is that the jutsu placed on Gaara was meant to make him stronger, but something went wrong and it didn't work the way it was supposed to." Oh, so it wasn't Gaara's father's fault then. He didn't know what would happen. Trying to correct Naruto's naive statement, Kakashi grimaced and said, no, he knew what would happen. He just hoped he could control it better, yet he wasn't able to. There really wasn't a need for Gaara to get that jutsu placed on him. However, Naruto abruptly interrupted himself as a memory of a previous exchange flashed through his mind. A discussion that might at last have an answer. Kakashi nudged the blonde, noting the sudden change in behavior. What is it, Naruto? It's just that. Well, Gaara back in Suna was treated just like how I am here in Konoha. If it's because of that jutsu on Gaara that makes people so sacred of him then. Naruto said softly. Jiraiya and Kakashi were fully aware of the young boy's thoughts. It was time to contain the damage. Jiraiya knelt down in front of the distraught blonde and said, yes, Naruto. Gaara was treated like that because of the jutsu. However, there is a difference between you and him. There is. The Sannin eventually admitted, well of course, but there is also a similarity. You and him have the same jutsu, Naruto. Though it was a risk, until they were ready to hear the truth, neither boy needed to know about the beasts they kept in captivity. But the best lies are the ones that are mixed in with the truth, as all shinobi know. Naruto clutched the hand on his shoulder as if it were a lifeline, shocked. In return, Kakashi gave the boy a comforting squeeze. It was going to be challenging for them both. The small bearded boy cried, but I sleep just fine. What? I don't understand. The jutsu is a very tricky business. People can do it in various ways. It requires the use of seals, but only the best can properly perform it. Jiraiya started by clarifying. The fourth Hokage, your father, placed this jutsu on you because it was the only way to save your life. However, he was a true master of sealing and your sealing came out perfectly. Gaara's on the other hand wasn't, and the person who did it did a god-awful job about it. Wait, my dad placed this jutsu on me. Why would he do that? Naruto asked, cutting the white-haired man off before he could say anything more. Jiraiya stretched the truth further, saying, like I said, to save your life. You were born on the 10th of October, the same day the Kyuubi attacked. Your life was in danger and so your father did what he thought was best for you in the village. Naruto was unable to know the reality. Not at least not yet. Naruto opened his eyes wide and gasped at the information the strange man had just revealed. Naruto said in a low voice, feeling as though his strength was ephemeral, "He died to save me." He was being pulled down by his arms, which felt like iron weights. If Kakashi hadn't grabbed him tightly, he would have fallen. That's right. You have a very powerful jutsu he left for you, so if the time comes you can use it to help others. But there is much more to this jutsu that we can't quite explain yet. I promise, when you're old enough, we'll explain it properly to you and Gaara. Sound good? Kakashi cut Jiraiya short before she could go any further afield. Naruto initially frowned and wanted to complain, but after noticing the hard look in the silver-haired man's lone eye, he decided to just move on. Returning his focus to the prone, red-headed figure, Naruto said, "Yeah, sounds good. When's Gar gonna wake up?" Letting his anxieties drop, dwelling on something he didn't fully understand was pointless. Kakashi and Jiraiya checked the boy for injuries, relieved that he had turned his attention to the redhead. Kakashi, sensing the blonde's discomfort, remarked out loud, "Thankfully, he's not hurt. The seal must have taken quite a bit out of him." Gaara awoke before Naruto could say anything he wanted to. Though his movements were jerky and uncoordinated, Naruto didn't care as long as he was moving. "Gar, you okay?" the nervous boy with the whiskers asked, being careful to speak quietly to him at all times, a habit he had developed over their time together. Teal eyes lingered unfocused on the tan face in front of him, filled with agony. Gaara forced himself to sit up, slowly nodding his head and blinking away the haze in his vision. Examining the boy's last seal, Jiraiya asked, "Gaara, do you feel any pain?" It bore a striking resemblance to the one the fourth Hokage had placed on his own son, though with some obvious modifications. "No, I feel fine. Just sore." Kakashi turned to the Sannin humming in astonishment next to him and said, "Then the seal worked as it should." "Well, yes, it appears so. Now I have one last thing we must do before the boy can go get a good night's sleep after so long." The three boys and men watched the older man take out a brush and ink once more. Seeing the confusion in their eyes, Jiraiya said, "This is relatively painless compared to the first." Starting the sealing process on the redhead's chest instead of his stomach, he said, "It is a genjutsu seal. It will change Gaara's appearance to that of a young Hatake." Kakashi became even more intrigued as he observed the man drawing odd characters on the boy's bare chest. What exactly will it do? It will alter everyone's perception of him. To everyone else, he'll look like the orphan son of a relative. Naruto asked in confusion, "What are you guys talking about?" At the abrupt change in topic, Kakashi was taken aback for a moment when he realized he had forgotten to mention Naruto Gaara's elevated status in the village. "I'm sorry Naruto, I forgot to tell you the cover story we're using for Gaara's sudden appearance. He's to be called Garakan Hatake. He is the son of a distant cousin who recently became an orphan. I'm his only living relative, so that's why he's now in the village. Try and remember that whenever people ask you about him, alright?" Kakashi clarified to the blonde kid. "Oh, I get it. It's like an undercover mission, right? No one can know who Gaara is." Kakashi laughed, finding it funny that the boy could make things seem easier in his head. "Yes, that's exactly right. Cool, I can do that." Returning her attention to the Sannin, Kakashi thought of something the man had said before. "Master Jiraiya, you said you needed my chakra for something else. This is the something, isn't?" Always so perceptive, Kakashi, and yes it is. Chakra is unique to each person just like a DNA strand. With this seal, I'll model the boy's chakra and appearance to resemble yours using the chakra in the first seal. But if he's using my chakra for both seals, won't it run out? Kakashi asked. Normally yes, but in this case Minato was the one who created this new seal. He managed to find a way for the seal to draw from the host's own chakra and alter it to that of the chakra it is using as a blueprint. It's just an elaborate mask really. Jiraiya went on to clarify. Hearing the older man discuss seals and their peculiar qualities, Naruto stood dumbfounded once more. If he was going to be a seal master, he was going to have to put in more effort. Finally realizing what the men were talking about, Naruto added, "Say pervy guy, what will happen now that I added my chakra too?" Jiraiya grinned grimly and said, "Well, he might just end up looking like you brat." Naruto looked at the broad-shouldered man with wide eyes, bewildered. "What, s? Seriously, Jiraiya nodded, grinning broadly now that he had completed the ceiling. As the Sannin stepped back and allowed Kakashi to take his place next to the boy, he said, "Kakashi, I want you to channel the chakra alone this time. We need him to take after you the most. Having Naruto's in the proverbial mixing batter will alter the boy to resemble the little brat. This is why we need yours to be the dominant one." He cast a sidelong glance at the stoic little red-headed boy. Teal eyes looked up, clashing with a dark orb. "Kakashi, will I never look like this again?" Attempting to calm the boys down, Kakashi said softly, "No, just as long as the seal is there. It's an illusion. We are not changing you, just masking your appearance. You'll always be Gaara to Naruto and I, but for your safety we need to hide who you truly are. Now are you ready?" Gaara took a small sip and nodded. The cool touch of the silver-headed man's gloved hand against his chest was felt by him. This time, instead of burning like it did the previous time, the chakra that was being poured into him felt more like warm water enveloping him. The two were surrounded by so much smoke that it was impossible for onlookers to see anything except their dark silhouettes. The white cloud vanished as quickly as it had appeared, revealing two males with silver heads. A tall one and a short one. "Gaara?" a breathless Naruto asked, his shock and confusion overwhelming him. The boy with a red head and raccoon eyes from Suna had vanished. A silver-haired boy with the same mop of hair as before stood in his place, but the dark rings around his eyes had vanished. His love-themed kanji tattoo persisted on his forehead, but this time it was black rather than the customary scarlet. He also lacked eyebrows and had silver lines that arched in shock at the looks he was receiving from others. Of all of them, his eyes were the most amazing. They had changed from that vivid teal to deep, cool oceanic orbs. It was Hatake Garakan. The boy he called a little brother had the same eyes that Naruto saw on himself every morning, and he was horrified to see them reflected back to him. It appears that Gaara inherited his seal. Jiraiya thought as he studied the boy, "Well, that worked better than I hoped. He looks like a mini Yu Kakashi, but with Minato's eyes. It's kinda creepy actually." Kakashi, too, was astounded by the transformation and gave a feeble nod while staring at the boy. Gaara asked, observing the strange looks cross the faces of the others, "Do I look funny?" After he recovered from his initial shock, Naruto said, "No, not at all. You really look like our little brother now, Gaara." Dazed, Kakashi said, "Yes, it's just going to take some getting used to." What a blast it was.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.